Jinchuriki, guardian of the underworld. The fight between Minato and the Kyuubi had lasted quite some time, and despite having summoned Gamabunta, Minato had serious trouble containing the powerful Kitsune. Damn, at this rate the village will be devastated. At that moment, next to Minato had Jiraiya appeared with what appeared to be two small and newborn babies in his arms that turned out to be Minato's two children, Naruto and Naruko. Seeing the situation in the village, Jiraiya was afraid that Minato would resort to using the Shiki Fuin. Are you sure it's a good idea? We have no idea what will happen if we try to separate the power of that demon. Despite everything, Jiraiya didn't want Minato to take a risk in that way, but he knew there was no other option. I'm afraid of no other option. If we want to save the village, it is necessary to divide the power of the Kyuubi and be able to seal it. As much as Minato hated doing that, he knew there was no other option. Jiraiya knew how risky it was for Minato to perform that sealing technique, but under the circumstances there was no choice but to separate the power from the Kyuubi and seal it in both of Minato's sons. With a quick sequence of seals, Minato began to trace the seals necessary to perform the Shiki Fuin. Once the seal sequence was finished, Minato asked the Shinigami to divide the Kyuubi's power into two and seal it into his two sons. After making the deal with the Shinigami and Minato losing much of his chakra and giving up part of his natural life as payment to the Shinigami, all the power of the Kyuubi no Kitsune's chakra was sealed in Naruko, while the consciousness and soul of the great Kitsune was sealed in Naruto. During the following years in the village, everyone considered Naruko as a kind of princess, not only because she was the daughter of her beloved Hokage, she was also considered a heroine for having the power of Kurama sealed, and thus preventing the demon from attacking them for being powerless. Meanwhile, Naruto, despite being Minato's son, used to be discriminated against by everyone. Not to mention that on the anniversary of the defeat of the fox, Naruto did his best to flee since several villagers and ninjas always chased him as if they were trying to hunt a wild animal. The reason why this happened was because after the Kyuubi's attack on the village and some found out about the situation of Minato's children, a large part of the council wanted Naruto's death in order to finish off the demon and be able to complete what Minato left pending. Clearly there were those who opposed this idea, since even though Naruto had the demon's conscience sealed, that did not make him a threat. For a while they were looking for a solution to the problem. Of course, as always, there were people like Danzo who tried to take advantage of this situation, since according to them, the presence of Naruto could affect the balance of Naruko's seal and ran the risk of the Kyuubi escaping again. In the end, with some help from Sarutobi, along with some of Minato's friends, they had managed to find the solution for Naruto's problems. Unfortunately, the results were not good at all. The solution was that to avoid problems with the Naruto seal, he had to be separated from his family. As painful as Kushina and Minato were, they knew that there was no other option. If they wanted to protect their children, they had to separate them, even if it meant that they would grow up without knowing of each other's existence. But they knew, or at least hoped, that the day would come when they would all form a family again. But despite Minato and Sarutobi's desire to consider Naruto a hero, most of the village still saw him as a monster. So the years passed, and Naruto grew up without knowing the love of a family. Orphanato from Konoha. Inside the orphanage there was a small blonde with whisker marks that identified him as Kurama's Jinchuriki, but from his appearance and his way of being, despite being so small, it was more than obvious that despite being in an orphanage, and despite Sarutobi Naruto's requests, he was somewhat malnourished, not to say almost abandoned, not to mention that most of the time he was completely alone. The reason why he was away from the other children of the orphanage was because the people in charge of the place did their best to separate Naruto from the other children in a rather cruel way. But surprisingly, it seemed that Naruto was not affected in the least by being separated in that way from the others. On the contrary, he seemed to be more than happy. They are just a nuisance. The truth is that it doesn't matter in the least if I have friends in this place or not. Despite being only a little boy in his young age, Naruto had already been a rather serious and somewhat cold person, and the truth is that no one could blame him for being like that. With all that he has had to endure in his short life, he had had to mature quite quickly. What no one knew, and which the whole village was completely unaware of, Was that part of the reason why Naruto had matured? Was that at his young age, and after receiving one of his birthday presents, he had managed some time ago to have contact with the reason for his suffering? While Naruto was still in his thoughts, a little redhead with glasses apparently his age had approached him, despite the instructions of the orphanage managers to move away from him. Surprisingly, the little redhead ignored them completely. Once the redhead sat next to Naruto, he put aside his thoughts to pay attention to the girl who had just arrived. "Hi Karen-chan, how are you?" "I'm fine. I see that as always being somewhat alone." Even though Naruto was someone really cold and distant from the other children in the orphanage, for some reason that he still couldn't comprehend, he felt pretty good being with Karen. He wasn't completely sure what it was, but there was something about her that made him feel pretty good. "And tell me, how is Kyukin?" "You could say that it is fine, without considering that Kurama spends almost all the time asleep." Although it is forbidden to mention Naruto's situation as a Jinchuriki, he himself had told Karen the reason why he was hated by the others in the village. Despite knowing that Naruto was Kurama's Jinchuriki, Karen didn't care in the least. "I'm glad to know that you've managed to keep going, although I'm quite worried that they're still trying to harm you in a rather cruel way." "You shouldn't worry. After all, you know very well the reason why I have to put up with those idiots." At that moment, Naruto could tell that Karen was a little nervous. "What's going on, Karen-chan?" "The truth is that I am afraid that something bad will happen. I am afraid that they will try to do something to harm you." It was more than obvious that Karen was somewhat scared since they previously tried to hurt her as punishment for being friends with the demon. But thanks to Naruto, he always did his best to protect her. "You shouldn't worry, Karen-chan. As long as you're by my side, I won't let those bastards hurt you." Despite how cold Naruto used to be with other people and his situation as Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, at least there were people who respected him and appreciated him as a human being. Thanks to that, Naruto aimed to protect his loved ones at all costs. Namake's mansion. In the courtyard of the mansion, you could see a redhead of about 27 or 30 years old next to a small blonde of about 1 year old. Judging by the agitated way the little blonde was at this moment, it was more than obvious that Kushina was training her little girl to be able to use Kurama's power. Despite Kushina's instructions and Naruto's efforts to use the Kyuubi's power, he was barely able to use a very slight layer of Kurama's demonic power. Seeing that it was useless, Kushina decided to end the training for today. After resting for a few minutes, Minato had arrived, and seeing Kushina's expression, he knew that the results of Naruto's training had been the same. After checking the seal and seeing that it was still intact, Minato still did not explain what was happening. It was assumed that the seal was designed so that Naruto could use the full power of the Kyuubi without the slightest effort. "What do you think is causing this?" "The truth is I don't know. I would like to find some explanation about this event." They were far from knowing that Kurama, despite being separated from all of his power, somehow managed to interfere with Naruto's progress in using the chakra. 3 weeks later. 10/October/. As was customary in the village, every October 10th they had a small party in honor of the victory of the 4th Hokage over the nine-tailed demon. After a few minutes, Minato next to his dear wife and daughter had arrived, and as expected the whole village was more than happy to have them present. What everyone did not know was that, as always, Naruto watched from the shadows. "Look at her. She's just a little girl who doesn't understand the true power you possess." "Don't worry about that. What the Yondaime doesn't know is that that little girl, no matter how much she trains, will never be able to fully use my power. At least, of course, I allow it." While everyone in the village celebrated, as always, the victory of the Yondaime over the Kyuubi, Naruto continued to observe everything from afar. Seeing everyone's behavior, Naruto could only curse them. Sometimes he wanted more than anything else to vent the suffering they have made him go through. "I still don't understand. If it were up to me, this village would already be on fire." The truth is that no matter what they do, they are nothing more than pathetic insects who deserve the worst. "This is how you talk, cub." When Naruto was about to retreat to one of the few places where he was at least treated like a normal person, Ichiraku Ramen. Thanks to his developed tracking skills, courtesy of Kurama, he noticed that some villagers and ninjas, as they did every year, were approaching where he was, and thus could start with the hunt. With nothing else to do, Naruto got out as fast as he could and tried to take refuge from those who were chasing him. As much as he wanted to defend himself and be able to vent all the hatred and anger he had with the level he was at, he would not be able to face the ninjas of at least Genin rank. Without Naruto being able to defend himself quickly, the ninja managed to catch up with him and then, together with some villagers, take him to a remote part of the village in order to finish what the yondaime started. Once they were far enough away not to be seen by some ninjas, and to make sure that there was no one else in the vicinity, they tied Naruto hand and foot as if he were a freshly hunted animal and then hung him from the branch of a tree. And if that were not enough, among the people who were in that place, several ninjas began to beat Naruto with several nunchucks as if it were a piñata. While the ninjas whipped Naruto while hanging upside down in a tree, they did not stop insulting him by saying really horrible things. I hope with this you learn, damn demon. Rest assured that this pain you will never forget. As he continued to be whipped without the slightest remorse by those ninjas despite the pain, Naruto could only think of one thing. I'll take revenge, I swear. Thus, after leaving a whipped and half-dead Naruto, with some care, some of the ninjas present took it upon themselves to throw Naruto, who seemed to be more dead than alive, into the forest of death, hoping that the animals would take care of the rest of the work, not knowing that because of their actions they would only strengthen Naruto in an unimaginable way. What no one knew was that from that day on Naruto would change a lot, whether for better or for worse. No matter which path Naruto took, the fate of the village may change. Chapter 2. The Voice of a Seal. Forest of Death. It was already beginning to dawn in the Forest of Death, and you could see it. Just at that moment, a certain blonde Jinchuriki was beginning to wake up after having to spend the whole night in that place. Where am I? When Naruto opened his eyes, he could tell that he was in a different forest. When trying to get up, Naruto felt how his whole body burned and hurt a lot. After thinking about it a little, he could remember the beating he received earlier. Those damned ones. You'll see what awaits them. After recovering a little, Naruto began to wander through the forest looking for a way out, not knowing that in the process something would happen that would possibly change his life. Ninja Academy. Classes had ended and each student retired to his home. After a few minutes, all the students had left except for a redhead who was sitting on a swing. Everything seemed to indicate that she was quite worried. Seeing that Naruto had not returned to the orphanage the night before, Karen was quite worried. She was afraid that during the celebration the day before, the villagers and ninjas had done something terrible. Naruto-kun, where will you be? Soon her thoughts were interrupted when a certain brown-haired Chunin appeared next to her. When Karen saw him, she hugged him and began to cry a little. Seeing how worried Irika was, she knew that something bad had happened. What's going on, Karen? It's Naruto-kun. The night before, he didn't return to the orphanage as he should. I'm afraid the villagers might have done something really bad to him. Hearing that Naruto had not returned the night before alarmed Irika quite a bit, since he was one of the few who knew very well what kind of action some villagers were taking on October 10th regarding Naruto. Don't worry. No matter what happens, I assure you that we will find it. Just before they started looking, they could notice that someone was approaching in the distance. That was when they realized that it was Naruto, but the way he looked, it seemed that something bad had happened to him. Before they did anything, Naruto ended up collapsing on the ground. When Karen and Irika approached Naruto, they could see that he had suffered several injuries, and worst of all, Naruto was barely able to breathe. Without wasting any more time, Irika and Karen took Naruto to the hospital since the injuries suffered had to be treated as quickly as possible. In the meantime, far from the continent of the Land of Fire, in what appeared to be an ancient forest, two unusual-looking subjects were gathered. Judging by the fact that they remained idle, everything seemed to indicate that they were waiting for someone. Hey, why do you think I came to this place? I could well have chosen a better place. I don't know, but whatever it is must be important for our boss to want to meet in this place. Just at that moment, from the shadows of the trees, appeared the one who seemed to be the leader, although his clothing was somewhat peculiar. He wears a red robe, along with a large white toga that flows around his body over his chest. He has black hair, dark eyes, and unusual sharp fangs. She also wears a necklace in the shape of a circle. When they saw him quickly, both subjects knelt down as a sign of respect. Listen, You must know that the seal that holds the spiritual guardian of the Jigaku is about to be released because the bearer of its power has returned. Hearing about that place where the seal was guarded made both subjects look at each other with a rather serious expression. After all, they knew in advance how dangerous it was that guardian to free himself from the seal without due care. But what intrigued them both was the identity of the bearer of that power. Since ancient times, it was known that from time to time the one who would be chosen to carry one of the most powerful powers ever seen would reincarnate. And what should we do? For the moment, we can only wait for the guardian to fully awaken. With nothing else to do, the three mysterious figures scattered among the shadows, hoping that in time the guardian of that creature would appear and wake up from its deep sleep. Hospital. It's been a couple of hours since Irika and Karen took Naruto to the hospital, and the truth is that they were both a little nervous about the results. After waiting for a while, Sarutobi had appeared, as one of his most trusted ambis had informed him that Naruto was in the hospital. How is Naruto doing? He is currently stable, but doctors said Naruto had received great physical damage. Irika told Sandame how the doctors, after checking Naruto's condition, discovered that he had several bruises and severe damage to his upper body from several consecutive blows to his back, and it was possible that he had several fractures. Not to mention that the ninjas in charge of taking care of Naruto saw how some ninjas had thrown Naruto into the forest of death, leaving him for dead. It was more than evident that Sarutobi was very upset by what had happened to Naruto. Despite all his and Minato's efforts to protect Naruto, he still could not understand the reason why the villagers acted in that way. Now that he knew what had happened, he must have done something. But the question was, what could he do? The best thing we can do is to ensure Naruto's safety. After a few minutes, Sarutobi, next to Irika, went to see how Naruto was doing. When they entered the room where Naruto was, they could see that despite the damage he had suffered, he was peacefully asleep. What everyone did not know was that actually part of the damage that Naruto had suffered was from having had contact with a certain creature from his past, and it was not exactly a good thing, in addition to the fact that at this time Naruto was having a kind of dream. Naruto's dream. After falling unconscious, Naruto found himself in what seemed to be some sort of void. No matter how much he focused his eyes, he was not able to see absolutely anything. He was not even able to feel his body. For a moment, he thought that those villagers and ninjas had finally killed him, which caused a great deal of anger to begin to form in his mind. Do you want revenge? At those words, Naruto was a little alarmed since that voice was something evil, but then he regained his composure, and as he could, he placed himself in a defensive position. Although Naruto was not able to see where the voice was coming from, he could perceive that that voice showed great power. If you want revenge, I can give you the power you need. The only thing I need is your help. Naruto thought about what that mysterious voice had told him. Although accepting his offer guaranteed him the ability to take revenge on those who made him suffer, he would not take the least to accept. But certainly Naruto was not as idiotic as he seemed, or at least as some people believed. With the experience he has, he knew that he should not trust himself 100% before Naruto could at least react. An immense reddish light cut him down momentarily. When Naruto opened his eyes, he could see that he was in what appeared to be some kind of rocky field that had a somewhat unique appearance. Judging by the place, it was more than obvious that it was uninhabited, although the truth is that it was not at all strange that no one was inhabiting that place, not with the way the land was. In addition to being a rocky terrain, the temperature was somewhat elevated, almost to the point of being unbearable for anyone. Not to mention that due to the temperature of the place, the few trees that were there were completely dry, almost to the point of crumbling with the slightest breeze. But the most notorious thing about the place was that in the distance you could see a kind of hill. After wandering around for some time, Naruto could see that in the distance near the hill there was a kind of oversized gate between the rocks. When he got close enough, he could see that right in the middle of the gate was engraved what appeared to be the image of a three-headed wolf. Being near that door, Naruto for some reason could sense that there was something familiar in that door, but he was not sure. Suddenly, he felt that something inside him was telling him that he should go through the doors. He didn't know why, but it was as if something on the other side of the door was calling them. When Naruto was about to open the door, a very familiar voice stopped him. When he turned around, he could notice that Kurama was behind him. Judging by the look he had, I knew something. What's going on, Kurama? Naruto listens carefully. No matter what, you shouldn't open that door. Seeing Kurama's attitude puzzled Naruto a little, as he could tell that Kurama was somewhat nervous, and that was not something normal for him. Whatever the reason, he must have known. What's behind that door? It's not time for you to know yet. The only thing I can tell you is that behind that door is sheltered one of the most dangerous creatures that have ever existed. Naruto was somewhat intrigued, as he wanted to know what kind of creature could be ensembled in that place. In the end, Naruto took heed to walk away from the door, but deep down he had a hunch that whatever was behind that door he would soon find out. Reality. When Naruto woke up, he could see that he was in a kind of white room. At first he did not know for sure where he was, but after focusing his eyes a little better, he could notice that he was in the hospital. Despite having woken up, Naruto still thought about that door he had seen in his dream. Even though everything seemed to be just a dream, he still wondered what happened to him, since being close to that door, he could feel that something inside him. I see you're better. At that moment, Sarutobi had entered the room and could happily notice that Naruto had finally recovered. Once Sarutobi sat down on the chair next to the bed, Naruto couldn't help but notice that Naruto had a rather serious expression. Naruto, I really feel guilty about what happened. Both Iruka and Karen told me that they found you quite injured. You don't have to worry. After all, I'm already used to this kind of situation. But this time it was totally different. Because of my carelessness, this time you were really hurt, and the worst thing is that since that day they left you for dead in the forest, and then they found out that you had survived, several of the council have been demanding that I do something about you and Karen. I hope you will forgive me. Hearing that, Naruto couldn't help clenching his fists as a sign of being really upset. For no reason would he forgive those who hurt him, especially if they dared to harm his Karen-chan, because if they dared to do even something to Karen, he himself would make sure to send them to hell itself. But hearing from Sarutobi that because of his injuries he was unconscious at least around for 3 or 5 days, he worried a lot about Karen, because if what Sarutobi said was true, she must be in danger. Before he could ask or do anything about it, Sarutobi went ahead to answer. Don't worry, she's fine. Thanks to some clan leaders supporting me, she's out of danger. Now you should rest a little. Hearing that Karen was fine, Naruto was quite happy, because thanks to Sarutobi, whom he considered like a grandfather, he was able to protect Karen. But despite the fact that Sarutobi managed to protect Karen from the advice, Naruto was still somewhat worried about her, since it was likely that without him in the orphanage, Karen would be in serious trouble, and that was something that he was not going to allow. By the way, Sarutobi Gigi, where is Karen now? Since you have been here, she has done her best to be by your side. She even came to sleep by your side every night since then. When Naruto turned around, he could see how Karen slept soundly next to him. Seeing how beautiful Karen looked asleep, Naruto blushed a little, since he considered it something tender to see Karen in that way. Despite being someone really serious, Naruto could only show that side of him when he was next to Karen. With nothing else to do, Naruto heeded Sarutobi's advice to rest a little, since the truth was still hurt by the beating he received in the Forest of Death. So after a few seconds he ended up sleeping a little, while he inadvertently ended up hugging Karen in an affectionate way. Ninja Academy. As usual, all the students waited patiently for Iruka to arrive and start classes. While all the students waited, both Karen and Naruto took advantage of the time to be able to coordinate in the training sessions after classes ended. After all, since what happened in the forest, both usually trained to try to become stronger. Without either of the two noticing, a certain blonde with blue eyes, who happened to be Minato's daughter, Naruto, looked at them with some intrigue, since she still did not understand why Naruto was dating Karen. Luckily for her, being behind them and almost in the last seats of the room, no one could see her behavior. But that did not prevent her best friend from noticing, since like her, she seemed to have some interest in a certain blonde in front of her. Naruto-kun, don't you think Karen-chan is lucky to be with Naruto-kun? I guess you're right. She wasn't sure why, but Naruto felt a little jealous of Naruto and Karen. As much as he wanted to avoid seeing them, something inside Naruto told him that he should interact at all costs with the blonde Jinchuriki. Although I really don't fully understand why Naruto-kun chose Karen-chan. After all, I'm one of the cutest girls around here. I don't know, Naruto. In my opinion, I think they make a nice couple. At that, Naruto just sighed a little and decided to concentrate better on the class, but not before seeing the couple in front of her for the last time. If Ino didn't know her friend well, she would swear she's a little jealous. After a few minutes, it was time for taijutsu practice at the academy. Once all the students were divided into groups of two, a group of boys and a group of girls. Once everyone was organized, they began with the practice, and certainly the results during the practice were something that no one expected. In the girls' section, the taijutsu demonstrations did not last long since the vast majority of the girls only wanted their beloved Sasuke to see them, which of course only hindered their performance as kunoichis quite a bit. In the end, as expected, Naruto was able to easily defeat her opponents. While Naruto advanced to the last round, Karen showed that she was not far behind, since she also easily defeated her opponents. But when it was her turn to face Hinata, it certainly took some work to have to fight with her. After all, Karen considered her as a great friend, but despite having to face each other, they both agreed to give their best until the end, since deep down they both wanted to show a certain blonde what they were capable of doing. Everyone watched in amazement as Hinata and Karen gave their best in the taijutsu combat. Even though Karen had a bit more experience than Hinata in taijutsu, Hinata proved to have great determination. I see you've improved a lot. Thank you. You have also improved. They lasted like this for a few minutes until Hinata couldn't take it anymore and ended up tired because despite having improved, she still didn't reach Karen's level. At first, everyone believed that Naruto would easily win the fight, but they certainly never expected Karen to give at least some difficulty to the Yandame's daughter. So both were fighting until the point where the fight had already lasted about 15 or 20 minutes. Seeing that both Naruto and Karen were on the limit, Irika decided to declare the match a draw. In the boys' fights, they were a little more intense. As always, Sasuke showed great mastery in taijutsu, thanks to the training he received from time to time from his father and older brother. Seeing that Sasuke advanced to the end, all the fangirls in the academy started screaming with joy for their beloved Sasuke, which in the Uchiha's opinion was quite annoying. As soon as it was Naruto's turn to fight, many began to say horrible things about how Naruto was not worth watching fight and that he should stop trying to be a ninja, but great was his surprise to see how Naruto defeated his opponents without the slightest effort, especially because when they provoked him, Naruto proved to be a little cruel to his opponents. One by one, male students were dropping like flies, but when Naruto had to face his friends, or at least the few he considered worthy of respect, even a little, they simply refused to fight for various reasons. Several of the students weighed that Naruto would not stand a chance against Sasuke, especially some teachers who watched from afar as they expected the fox boy to be humiliated and beaten by Sasuke. Thus the two began the taijutsu fight. Although Sasuke was trained by his father Naruto, it did not seem that he would give up easily in the fight. I see that for a simple orphan you have some skill. Too bad that won't do you any good against an Uchiha like me who was trained to be elite. To be one of the elite, you are nothing more than a brat who does not understand the effort of others. Say what you want, but that doesn't change the fact that someone as pathetic and familyless as you can do something against someone who belongs to one of the best clans. Hearing those words from Sasuke, there was a bit of an awkward silence. Even though many considered Naruto to be one of the worst students in the academy, they knew that he deserved to receive such an insult. But that insult was a low blow, even for Sasuke. Shut up, you don't know what it's like to suffer in solitude. Obviously, Sasuke's words irritated Naruto quite a bit, since he can remember or use reason. Despite having few people who have always supported him, he always had to endure a real hell in the village. The truth is that you are nothing more than a pathetic failure, just like that dumb redhead with glasses. The truth is that I don't understand why they continue. For me, they should stop trying to be ninjas since they only hinder those who really deserve it. At those words, Naruto stood still for a few moments. If there was one thing he really hated more than anything, it was being discriminated against in that way, but what really bothered him was that Sasuke looked down on Karen, and what Sasuke said was the trigger for his anger. Seeing that Naruto was not moving, Sasuke began to lose patience. Of course, if at some point he has had patience. If you're not going to attack, I'll do it. Without waiting any longer, Sasuke threw himself towards the motionless blonde, ready to finish him off. When everything seemed to indicate that Sasuke would defeat Naruto in practice, many were surprised to see what happened. Without anyone being able to see Naruto in the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Sasuke, punching him hard in the stomach, causing Sasuke to spit out some saliva while backing away a bit due to the pressure exerted by the blow. Before Sasuke could do anything, Naruto took advantage of his opponent's closeness with a quick movement and headbutted Sasuke with a strong blow, causing him to fall to the ground in a strong ache pain. Before Sasuke could get up and counterattack, Naruto quickly approached where he was, and without Sasuke being able to defend himself, or at least react, Naruto, using some force with his foot, began to exert some pressure right on Sasuke's stomach. I hope that with this you learn where your place is. When Naruto finished speaking, he began to apply a little more force, causing intense pain in Sasuke. Seeing this, just no one expected such hostility from the blonde towards an opponent. Just when all of Sasuke's fangirls, or at least most of them, tried to defend their precious Sasuke, did not expect the following. Before they could do anything, Naruto gave them a rather cold look, causing most, if not almost everyone in the class to run cold. TSK. Pathetic. For no other reason to be in a place like that, Naruto retired to the classroom waiting for classes to end, and so, according to his words, he would not have to put up with some garbage, of course, except for the only people he considered worthy of his respect. In another part of the village, more accurately in the tower of the Hokage Minato next to Kushina, with the help of Sarutobi, with his telescope jutsu, or crystal ball jutsu, they were watching the academy's taijutsu practice matches, and certainly both were somewhat perplexed by what they had seen. Although they saw that Naruto managed to excel thanks to the training he had, it made them happy, but as for Naruto, it was something else. They never expected to see such an attitude in him, and the truth is that they felt quite bad. Seeing Naruto's ruthless attitude towards his opponents made Minato and Kushina feel guilty. After all, so far, due to the advice, they have not been able to do anything to help their beloved son, and that hurt them quite a bit. Returning to Naruto, he was currently training in the forest next to Karen. Judging by their appearance, it was more than obvious that both of them have been training for a couple of hours. But from the two of them, it seems that Naruto had been constantly fighting various enemies without any rest. And it wasn't a joke at all. After all, Naruto, in addition to having some blood on his knuckles from constantly banging on the trees in the training ground, almost to the point of breaking his hands, was really tired to continue. Despite the fatigue and the wounds that Naruto had, he still remembered those words of Kurama that he told him the day he was wandering in the forest after being abandoned to his fate. If you want to become strong, take all the pain and suffering they give you and make them part of strength. Only then will you be able to overcome your own limits. Despite wanting to continue training, Naruto knew that he had to rest enough and be able to regain enough strength to be able to continue. During his way back to his small apartment, Naruto was somewhat quiet as he was still thinking about what Sasuke said at the academy. Meanwhile, Karen continued to think about what happened. She was certainly grateful to Naruto for protecting her, but seeing the way he behaved during the confrontation made her quite worried. The truth was that Naruto would be too influenced by the insults of the villagers and end up doing something really horrible. Seeing how thoughtful Karen was since they left the training ground, Naruto knew from her expression that she was worried, and the truth was that he couldn't blame her. After what happened at the academy during the taijutsu tests, Naruto was afraid that Karen would start seeing him like the other villagers and ninjas on the blade. Before she could speak and be able to say something to him, Karen stepped forward, but instead of talking, she simply hugged him. Naruto-kun, please, I don't want you to be guided by hatred. The truth is that I wouldn't bear to lose you. Naruto could clearly see that Karen suffered seeing it that way, and it was something he couldn't stand. But despite everything Karen and Sarutobi told him about forgetting the hatred of others in the village, Naruto couldn't just put aside all the hatred of others, but seeing the expression Karen's sadness, knew she had to do something. Karen, I really don't like to see you suffer this way, but despite what happens, I promise that I will do my best to protect you. Naruto-kun. Karen increased the strength of the hug a little. Don't worry, Karen-chan. I promise that no matter what happens, I'll always be by your side. At those words, Karen felt a little better because despite everything Naruto had to endure, she would be by his side. With nothing else to do, they both returned to their apartment to rest. What no one in the village knew was that they would soon know what it is like to have to see a real demon and not precisely the one that everyone fears, since the demon waiting to be released from the shadows may be even worse than Kyubi himself. In a fairly distant place, to be precise the place where the soul of the spiritual guardian of the Jigaku was protected, it could be seen how the seal that was right in the center of that door had a slight crack. Very soon I will be free, and this world will know what it is to suffer. Without further ado, the spirit was sealed. He returned to his dream knowing that the day would soon come when he would be free. Chapter 4. Beginning of Plans. It's been about 1 month since what happened between Naruto and Sasuke during the practice match at the academy, and as expected there were quite a few complaints about it. Seeing the hostility that Naruto had shown towards the heir of the Uchiha clan during the practice confrontation at the academy, many demanded that something be done about it. Some even suggested that Minato should end what he started some time ago regarding the reincarnation of the Kyubi, since it was a matter of time before the seal that kept the Kyubi imprisoned was broken. Hearing such stupid things from several people made Sarutobi and Minato quite upset about it, since apparently people still treated Naruto as the Kyubi and not as a human being. But despite all their attempts, they unfortunately could not do anything about it. Uchiha Enclosure. In the courtyard of the Uchiha clan enclosures, you could see how an agitated Sasuke dedicated himself to training like crazy without any rest, since he still remembered how he had been defeated by Naruto. But despite all his efforts, Sasuke had reached the limit of his endurance. Damn. I'm supposed to be from the elite. How is it possible that I lost like that? And even more so against someone who doesn't come from one of the best clans? No matter how hard he tried to push those thoughts away, Sasuke couldn't forget that shameful beating he received in front of everyone. While Sasuke rested a bit from his hard training, Fugaku watched him from afar, and the truth seemed to be a little disappointed in his youngest son, almost as if he considered him a disgrace to the family. Since Sasuke's defeat at the hands of Naruto in that practice fight at the academy, Fugaku began to treat Sasuke differently than usual. Now every time he has time to train him, he is usually a little stricter in training than he was before, almost to the point of leaving him quite injured in practice. Seeing the way his father treated his younger brother really bothered Itachi quite a bit. For no reason would he allow his father to mistreat Sasuke in such a way, but unfortunately he could not do anything at the moment to prevent it. In the streets of the village, both Naruto and Karen had gone for a short walk to relax a little. But despite everything, they were only taking a short walk. Several people gave them looks full of hatred and anger. They even said horrible things about them. Just as they were about to leave, so they wouldn't have to listen anymore, they could see that in the distance 3 boys were bothering Hinata. Naruto, seeing how those 3 boys wanted to harm Hinata because he considered her weak, decided to intervene, since one of the things he hated the most was that people acted that way with others. Even though they outnumbered him, he would not allow them to hurt Hinata, since he was one of the few people who were important. Once they arrived at the place, and to get those boys away from Hinata and prevent them from doing anything, Karen and Naruto placed themselves in front of her to protect her. "Are you okay, Hinata-kun?" "Claro, Karen-chan, I'm fine, it's nothing." After making sure that Hinata was okay, Naruto decided to face the boys, but as usual, just seeing him, those boys began to mock. "And what is a poor demon like you supposed to do to us? I heard that no one wants him, since many consider him a kind of monster, so it is better to stay away from him." Having to endure the taunts of those boys made Naruto's patience gradually decrease, while Hinata and Karen were quite upset, because despite everything that most villagers say about Naruto, they knew that Naruto was not a demon, much less a monster. But when they said they should apologize for what they had said, the 3 boys started laughing at them. "And what can you know about it? After all, I doubt anyone as pathetic as you could do anything about it. It would be best if losers like you would stop trying to be ninjas, as they would simply hinder those who truly deserve it." Hearing those words made Karen and Hinata a little sad, especially when they said that they were only wasting other people's time. But Naruto was a little different when it comes to insults. While he could tolerate being insulted and mistreated all the time, what really irritated him was being messed with his loved ones. But when he saw that those boys tried to overdo it with Hinata and Karen by saying some somewhat suggestive things, it was what caused his anger, or at least much of it, to be released, letting loose a somewhat terrifying killer instinct. And truth be told, The sense of death felt by everyone who was nearby at that moment was something they hadn't felt before. Just nearby, a certain silver-haired Ambu who was reading his beloved book on one of the rooftops of the buildings could feel the killing instinct that Naruto emanated, and although it didn't seem like it, certainly that instinct was something that disturbed him, even if it was a little. When he managed to focus his eyes, he could notice what was happening, so he decided to intervene before things got out of control. When the three boys who were annoying Karen and Hinata saw Naruto, they almost peed their pants in fear, as Naruto possessed a rather scary and almost inhuman look, not to mention that he showed a certain touch of evil as well as possessing great hostility. If they know what is best for them, they had better leave or else I will be forced to use force. You don't, you scare us. No matter what you do. In addition, we outnumber you. I don't think you're capable of. Win. It was more than clear that the three boys were scared enough to do anything about it since despite being more than Naruto, something prevented them from moving. It was then that they realized that Naruto was heading towards them with the clear intention of teaching them a rather painful lesson. But before Naruto could do anything, Kakashi appeared in the middle of everyone, trying just at the right time. Seeing that Kakashi was in front of them, Naruto simply stopped since he had known Kakashi for some time. Seeing that Naruto had stopped, the three boys expected that Ambu to take care of beating Naruto, but when they saw that Kakashi did nothing about it, and that he also asked them to leave, they were quite upset. Before anyone protested about it, they could see that Kakashi had a rather serious expression, so they decided that the best thing to do was to leave, but not before saying that they would regret it. Once the boys left, Kakashi asked Naruto to give him an explanation of why he acted that way. It was when Naruto told him that those boys tried to overdo Hinata and Karen, so he simply tried to defend them. Hearing that Naruto was only defending Hinata from those boys relaxed Kakashi a bit, but he was still somewhat worried about the instinct that Naruto released. He didn't know why, but there was something in that feeling that worried him a lot, especially because even for an instant he could notice that Naruto's eye color had changed and were not exactly like Kurama's eyes when Naruto released his power when he was upset. In the end, Kakashi put aside his thoughts so that he could try to talk a little with Naruto about what happened to those boys, since deep down he feared that Naruto might do something that he would later regret. Naruto, I know that Hinata is one of the few important people to you, and what would you do to protect her? But you must understand that you can't always solve things the way you tried to. That may have been true, but the truth was that Kakashi wanted to make Naruto reflect, at least a little, since he knew that Naruto was not one to stay calm in situations like this. With all due respect, Kakashizen, I fear that I have no choice but to act in this way. After all that I have lived through, I cannot afford to be weak. With all that I have suffered here, I cannot sit idly by. Without further ado, Naruto began to leave, and moments later he was followed by Karen, who politely said goodbye as she did not want to cause more trouble. As they both retreated, Kakashi couldn't stop worrying about Naruto. As much as he hated to admit it, deep down he felt that Naruto was somehow right in what he had said, and the truth was that he could not blame him for thinking that way. With all that Naruto has suffered so far due to the villagers and ninjas in the village, it was no surprise to Kakashi that he had such an almost hostile attitude towards others. Sincerely, Kakashi hoped that Naruto would not be on the path of hatred and revenge for any reason. But the way things are going, it was almost certain that Naruto would soon hate the village, if he didn't already hate it. I just hope you are able to see past the hate and can make the right decision. So with nothing else to do for the moment, Kakashi left, but not before taking Hinata to his house, since he was sure that those boys would try to hurt him once she was alone. What no one had noticed because of what had happened was that from the shadows of Root Ambu had been watching Naruto for a long time, and with what he had seen he knew that he had found something that perhaps Danzo would be interested in. At the same time, in a part close to what happened, one of the best Ambis of the Uchiha clan, who was one of the best spies there was able to see everything that happened, so he decided to return to inform Fugaku what had happened, since his mission was to collect as much information as possible about the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki and be able to use it to his advantage. What no one had any idea was that because of Sasuke's loss to Kyuubi boy, Fugaku was really upset, despite the fact that his youngest son, who had been trained by elite ninjas, was easily defeated by the village demon, and that was something he would not tolerate for any reason, especially since that defeat was something embarrassing for his clan. Because of that humiliation that the Uchiha Fugaku clan received, he decided to advance the plans of the state plan that he had reserved for a couple of months later. The days passed, and certainly some interesting things happened regarding Naruto. Since what happened with those boys, little by little Naruto's attitude was changing little by little. It even seems that his skills in taijutsu improved a little. After learning what happened regarding the killing instinct that Naruto had previously released, Minato with Sarutobi's help made sure that nothing bad happened with the seal that kept Kurama sealed, but no matter how much they checked, they could not find any alteration or flaw in the seal. Unable to find any flaws in the Minato and Sarutobi seal, it could not be explained how it was possible that Naruto, still a child of no more than 9 years old, could release such hostility. In addition, every time someone tried to hurt him or Karen in order to teach them a lesson, Naruto, even if it was unconsciously, usually lets loose even a small part of hostility, while his eyes, in some cases, used to show a deep aggressiveness and hatred that for a moment were almost similar to Kurama's and at the same time very different. But the most notorious thing of all, at least for Naruto, was that since he let out that killer instinct, he has sometimes had some visions or dreams about a huge three-headed wolf destroying everything in its path. On some occasions, I could even see that next to the wolf there was a gigantic fox very similar to Kurama, but the only difference was that instead of being a fox with reddish fur, it was with yellow fur with some reddish touches. And the most curious thing was that that fox, or at least his gaze, had a certain resemblance to Naruto. Whatever those visions were, Naruto had a hunch that sooner or later he would know the meaning of those visions. He almost always had. Training camp. After the classes ended as usual, Naruto next to Karen were training in training area number 9. I don't think it's necessary to say why I chose number 9 in the training area, because despite what they have improved lately in physical training, they had to improve their skill with ninja weapons. Just as Naruto was about to throw another shuriken towards the target on the tree, he could feel a kind of tingling in his head. At first, he didn't pay attention to it, as he thought it was something tired, but after a few seconds he could feel that little by little pain began to increase. Feeling that pain, Naruto began to feel somewhat agitated, almost to the point of having to see almost blurred. Karen, seeing that Naruto looked a little more agitated than usual, began to worry since it was not normal for Naruto to get agitated so quickly and less so in that way. Naruto-kun, are you okay? Don't worry, Karen-chan is just. But Naruto couldn't say anything else as the pain began to run through much of his body and then increased considerably. Damn. Seeing the condition he was currently in, Naruto had no choice but to finish training for today. While Naruto tried to stay on his feet, Karen helped him a little since apparently her boyfriend was not in condition to walk. While they were returning to their apartment to get some rest, Kurama had a bad feeling about what happened to Naruto just a few moments ago, since what happened to him during training was not normal. He didn't know what it was, but he was afraid that the pain that Naruto suddenly felt during training somehow had to do with that dream he had some time ago. I just hope this doesn't have to do with that seal, otherwise it's possible that Naruto is in danger. The truth was that Kurama was not entirely wrong about the seal that kept the guardian of the Jigoku guarded, since it was a fact that both Naruto and that creature, in some way that was difficult to explain, were connected, more than one could imagine. In a place far from the elemental nations, right in what seemed to be a kind of ancient castle, you could see how the one who seemed to be the leader of that place, or at least one of its best men, was somewhat pensive. Judging by his gaze, he seemed to be somewhat worried. At that moment, a subject with the appearance of a humanoid demon in motorcycle clothing entered and could see that his partner was somewhat tense. The truth is that he didn't need to be a genius to know the reason why his companion was in that state, since lately things in Jigoku have been somewhat tense regarding the seal of the spirit guardian. It was at that very instant that they both felt a kind of disturbance in the balance of the seal, and that could only mean one thing. It's only a matter of time before much of the seal is broken. Chapter 5. Beginning of Chaos. Right in the depths of the base of Root was Danzo organizing some things regarding a matter of great importance. Everything seemed to indicate that he was meeting with some people, and judging by Danzo's look, it was more than obvious that he was in the middle of a matter of great importance. At that moment from the shadows appeared the ambu that previously watched over Naruto. When Danzo saw it, I hope that one of his best ambus managed to obtain valuable information about the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yuko. After receiving the information about what happened, Danzo was more than happy with the results. Now he knew perfectly well what he should do if he wanted to control Naruto at will. Before the ambu disappeared, Danzo ordered him to send for certain ambus from Raz that would be of great use to him. After waiting a few minutes, the named ambus arrived and certainly looked a little different than usual, as their attire was nothing like the traditional uniform of the ambus de Reis. After receiving the necessary instructions from Danzo, the ambus bowed slightly. "Well, you know what to do, and remember that I don't want failures," as ordered by Danzo-sama. So the ninjas retreated to fulfill their objective. Once those ninjas disappeared, Danzo stayed behind to review the documents on his desk detailing the skills of the ninjas he had sent. Very soon, absolute power will be mine. What Danzo did not know was that despite everything, his plans would be spoiled in a way he could not imagine. So the days passed in the village, and the truth is that some interesting things had happened regarding Naruto. After what happened with those boys, Naruto's way of being seemed to be slowly changing as he began to show some hostility to almost anyone in the village. Even when someone tried to harm either him or Karen, whether it was a villager or ninja lesser than the Chunin, Naruto would simply resort to brute force. Seeing this, Minato and Kushina were afraid that Naruto would get lost in the darkness. So whenever they had the opportunity, they did their best so that Naruto could interact with Naruto, and at least so they could live even a little with his sister. Even if neither of the two could do anything about it to help Naruto, at least Naruto would have even a slight chance to be by his side. But so far it has been almost impossible for Naruto to interact with Naruto. But as for Naruto, for some reason, he felt that something was not right, since every time he got quite upset or let out part of his killer instinct, for some reason he felt different from normal. It was as if something inside him, right in the depths of his soul, something wanted to awaken and go out to destroy everything in its path. Having those kinds of sensations, Kurama feared that the creature in Naruto's visions was somehow related to his behavior. Because if so, it was possible that somehow the seal was weakening little by little to the point of breaking due to the hatred that Naruto is usually exposed to by a large part of the village, and the truth was that he was not entirely wrong. Unfortunately, something would soon happen in the Leaf Village that would make Naruto quite angry, almost to the point of unleashing that creature. Uchiha Enclosure. At this time, Fugaku, who was in his personal library reviewing the last details to be able to start his coup d'etat, since thanks to the help of Itachi and some of his best ambus, he had not only obtained some extremely important data about the Yondaime and some things about the other shinobi that would be very useful to him. With Itachi's help, he had also collected quite useful information about Naruto, and thanks to that he would be able to take advantage of it to be able to control Naruto of his own free will without him being able to oppose it. Or at least that's what I thought. After having everything ready for his coup d'etat, Fugaku could feel the presence of someone familiar behind him, so his expression became somewhat more serious than it was. "I know you're there. Get out at once, as there's no need for you to hide." From the shadows had emerged one of the best ambus of the Uchiha clan. Despite wearing a crow-like ambu mask, it could be seen that she was wearing black hair tied in a ponytail. "How is everything going, Itachi? I hope you have good news." "Everything is going as you planned, Father. No one suspects the invasion in the slightest. At the moment, some of our best ninjas are preparing the final adjustments. Although it may not seem like it, Itachi was upset about the matter of the invasion/coup d'etat that his father was organizing. Fugaku was happy to hear that his plan was going perfectly. If all went well, not only would the Uchiha clan have absolute control over the village as it should have been from the beginning, but it would also be able to take revenge on that Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi for such humiliation that he put the clan through. Not to mention that if he were lucky, he would be able to obtain a power that no other deserves to possess. "You can now retire, Itachi, once everything awaits at my command." "As orders, Father." With nothing else to do, Itachi disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Once Itachi disappeared from the place, Fugaku's expression became somewhat serious, more than normal, of course, and then he focused his gaze on a corner of the library. Seconds later, a man with several bandages, almost to the point of looking like a mummy in the middle of mummification, had appeared in the shadows. For a few seconds, there was quite a bit of silence in the place until that bandage guy decided to talk at once since he had a matter to discuss with Fugaku. You seriously think it's good to trust Itachi? Remember that despite being part of the Uchiha clan, he is still very loyal to Minato and the other fools in this village. The truth is that I don't worry so much since I have everything very well planned. In addition, Itachi knows very well that carrying out this coup d'etat is what the prestigious Uchiha clan needs. Danzo could clearly see that Fugaku was overconfident about his plans. If he continues with this attitude, it was quite possible that despite all the plan that he has worked out for a long time, it will be ruined by a simple miscalculation. You better be very careful, Fugaku, regarding Itachi. It is very possible that at some point he could defect. Don't worry about it. If Itachi proves to be a threat to the plan, I will simply eliminate him as well as anyone who tries to get in my way. Danzo knew that there was a strong possibility that Fugaku's plan would completely fail, but the truth didn't matter in the least whether Fugaku succeeded or not. After all, he would manage to take advantage of the situation. Ninja Academy. While Naruto and Karen shared their lunch as they did every day, Naruto occasionally watched them from afar, although the truth was that she still didn't understand why her parents wanted her to spend more time with Naruto. But despite having some doubts about why his parents asked him to do something like that, at least that way he would have a little motivation to be closer to Naruto. Classroom. As usual, all the boys waited patiently for Irika to arrive and start the day's classes. While Naruto talked with Karen and even with Hinata that since what happened with those boys, despite what he told her about it, she had become someone close to them. While they were talking, Naruto felt the sensation of being watched by someone else in the room who had a certain hostility towards him, although the truth is that this was not something new for him, since it was Sasuke again. The reason why Sasuke would occasionally give Naruto a hateful look was because of what happened in the academy's practices. From that day on, Sasuke became someone a little colder in personality, almost to the point that he doesn't smile in the slightest as before. In the end, when classes were over and everyone left, Hinata, who was about to retire, was soon surrounded in front of the academy by a couple of boys who, in addition to being relatives of the boys who had bothered Hinata before, turned out to be the sons of the leaders of some minor clans in the village. It was more than clear that those boys had clear intentions of annoying Hinata. Seeing this, both Karen and Naruto decided to intervene as they knew that subjects like them only liked to cause trouble. And as expected, those boys acted the same as those boys, but unlike those boys, it was more than obvious that they were a little more annoying. Just when Naruto told them to leave and stop bothering, the taunts of those boys were not long in coming. Although after a few seconds those taunts soon turned into really horrible insults for Hinata. The truth is that I don't know why the heiress of one of the most important clans in the village wastes her time with trash like you. In my opinion, it would be best if Hayashishima did something to discipline his daughter for hanging out with trash like them. I agree with you, and I think the best punishment would be for Hayashishima to demote her to the secondary family of the Hyuga clan, since being someone so weak, she does not deserve to be the heir to one of the most prestigious clans. In fact, in my opinion, I don't think it even deserves to be a Hyuga. Obviously, those insults made Hinata feel really bad, almost to the point of letting out some tears due to sadness, something that did not go unnoticed by Naruto. Before Naruto could intervene in this regard, a boy with electric bluish hair and a somewhat thin figure named Rake intervened, holding the boy's arm. Despite being only a boy of no more than 10 years old, he really possessed considerable strength that counteracted his physique. If they know what is best for them, they had better leave. And what are you supposed to be able to do about it? Even though you come from one of the best clans doesn't mean you're capable of doing anything to stop us. Although the truth is I don't know why your clan. Because after what happened in that attack, there was almost nothing left of them. Just saying that caused a somewhat awkward silence instead, since it was very well known in the village what happened to Rake's clan some time ago, and for someone to make fun of Rake's family in that way was something that no one dared to do since it was a very sensitive matter. especially since provoking someone from Rake's clan in that way was like playing with fire in very high temperatures. After Rake recovered from what he said, he simply stopped holding the boy's arm and seconds later gave a powerful kick right in the stomach to that boy, who sent him flying until he crashed into a nearby wall. When that boy tried to get back from that kick, Rake approached where he was and then held him tightly by the collar of his shirt. Listen to me very well, idiot, because I will only tell you once, so I hope you never forget it. For no reason will I allow you or anyone else to talk about my clan in that way, because otherwise I will personally make sure to make them suffer. After Rake made it clear what would happen if they insulted their clan again, those boys moved away as quickly as possible since they knew what someone from the clan to which Rake belonged was capable. Not for nothing their best shinobi were known as some of the most powerful swordsmen in existence due to their almost deadly own style with the sword, the Tetsugaku Kage, Shadow Edge. Once the boys left, Rake approached Naruto and the others to see if everything was okay. Once he made sure that everything was okay, he left the place, but not before Karen stopped him, asking him the reason why he had intervened. It's not that she didn't like Rake helping, but she, as well as Naruto and Hinata, wanted to know why Rake decided to interfere with what they do. Since normally the members of Rake's clan are usually somewhat cold and lonely people due to the lifestyle they lead, so they don't usually get as involved with others. Rake, seeing his curiosity, simply replied that he simply felt the need to intervene, since although he did not show it openly, deep down he could not stand other people trying to take advantage of others in that way. Far from there, to be precise, deep within the Fugaku root bases, he was meeting with Danzo along with a small battalion of ninjas that they had both gathered ready to receive orders from their two leaders. Well, everything is ready to start. That's Fugaku. After this, there will be nothing left. After this victory, Konoha will be ours. Once Konoha is taken, the elemental nations will soon fall. Quickly, the ninja that were en route disappeared in order to begin the destruction of Konoha so that its leaders can rebuild a new village from the ashes. Konoha. Moments before the invasion. Everything was quiet in the village. All the workers were busy at their jobs in order to earn a living while the ninjas were going from one place to another due to the missions they were performing without knowing that soon their tranquility would be affected. While no one suspected what was soon happening right in the shadows, some figures of what appeared to be amber rank ninja were guarding a certain specific area. After being able to locate their target, they disappeared, hoping to act at the right time. Just at this time, it was already beginning to get dark, and in the streets it could be seen that Naruto and Karen returned to the apartment they shared, since after leaving Hinata at home, after what happened at the academy, Hinata asked them that if they wanted they could spend some time with her so they could get to know each other a little better, which they both quickly accepted. At first, Hinata was afraid that her father would get upset with her for inviting some friends, but surprisingly, Hayashi didn't seem to be bothered by the fact that Naruto and Karen were there. Since being friends with Minato, he knew the situation that Naruto was going through lately, so letting Naruto interact with Hinata was the least he could do for his dear friend. After saying goodbye to Hinata and promising her that they would return the next day, Naruto and Karen left, although for some reason Naruto had a bad feeling. As they walked through the streets, Naruto could sense that something was not right. It was just at that moment that a kunai passed right next to Naruto's cheek, causing a slight cut. "Naruto-kun, are you okay?" "Don't worry, it's just a slight cut." When they both turned to the place where the kunai came from, they could see that on the roof of a building were gathered what appeared to be 3 ninjas of at least Jounin level. "What do they want here?" "We don't have to answer you, brat, because I don't think you'd live to know." When he saw them, Naruto knew that these guys were more dangerous than they seemed, because thanks to his sensory abilities, he could perceive that these guys were really dangerous. Before Naruto or Karen could do anything, there was a series of explosions that shook the entire village, causing several destructions everywhere as chaos began. Once the explosions stopped, a large number of Uchiha clan ninjas accompanied by some renegade Kyumo and a Wagakure ninja caused chaos to quickly spread throughout the village. While the shinobi of Konoha were doing their best to repel the invaders, both Minato and Sarutobi were preparing for battle, but not before one of the best ambus arrived with disturbing information about the invaders. Hearing that the invading shinobi were led by the Uchiha clan made Minato and Sarutobi have a serious expression as they knew that sooner or later the Uchiha clan. After the Ambu left the place, Minato went home as quickly as possible so that he could make sure his family was okay. Namake's mansion. By this time Minato, with the help of his best jutsu, had arrived at his home in a matter of seconds, and fortunately for him, both Kushina and Naruto were fine. Once Minato arrived at the side of his family, Kushina, who had Naruto by his side, asked Minato what was happening. Once he learned that the village was being attacked by several renegade shinobi, in addition to the Uchiha Kushina clan, he became quite worried, as, "And what will we do now? It is very possible that those ninjas of IWA will try to take revenge for what happened in the Third Shinobi War. Also, remember that both Naruto and Naruto possess the power of Kyuubi sealed in them, so it is very possible that they will try to go after them. The best we can for the moment is to try to reduce their forces. In the meantime, we will do our best so that they do not approach anyone innocent, especially Naruto and Naruto due to their status as Jinchurikis." The latter surprised Naruto quite a bit since she never imagined that in addition to her Naruto also possessed the power of that beast sealed in him, turning him like her into a Jinchuriki. Although now that she thought about it, that would be a good explanation for why all the villagers called Naruto a demon every time she tried to live with him. Although if that were true, perhaps that would explain why whenever she saw Naruto, she wanted to be close to him. But even so, Naruto was somewhat curious to know how it was possible that Naruto possessed a power similar to hers, so she decided to ask her parents. Unfortunately, before being able to ask, Minato came forward to speak, saying that it would be best to retire. Just as they were about to leave for a safer place, an immense and powerful blaze of fire went straight at them, which if not for Minato's quick reflexes, he and his family would have been burned. But before the smoke cleared, Minato and his family could hear a very familiar voice. "I see that you still have your skills. Now I see why you were chosen as Hokage instead of me." When the smoke cleared, Minato could see that on the fence was the person responsible for everything, which caused him to have both a serious and sad expression, after everyone who started all this was once his friend. "Fugaku, why are you doing all this?" The truth is that Minato had a theory as to why his once friend did all this, but he wanted to be sure. "The reason why I do this is simple. What I seek is to destroy this village and to be able to create one from its ashes where the Uchiha clan is able to rule as it should have been from the beginning." Upon hearing Fugaku's words, both Minato and Kushina were quite upset because if what he said tried to comply with it, several people would be in danger. "You know that if you continue with this, several innocent people will die? It is better that you stop all this before you do something that you can regret later." Hearing this, Fugaku couldn't help but show a faint evil smile. "The truth is that I don't care who dies or who lives after this. No matter what happens, I won't stop for anything." Seeing that Fugaku would not change his mind, Minato decided that the best thing to do would be to end this once and for all, even if it meant having to kill the one he once considered his best friend. Chapter 6. The Unleashed Inner Power. The situation was quite delicate. Both Minato and Fugaku did not make the slightest move as they both knew that a wrong move could be the last. Although it didn't seem like it, Minato wasn't sure what he should do at such a time. While he could use the Hiraishin no Jutsu to try to get Fugaku as far away from his family as possible so he could save her, there was also the possibility that more renegade ninja were hiding, waiting for a perfect opportunity to attack. Damn. What should I do? If I am not careful, a single carelessness would be enough to endanger my family star. No matter how much he thought about it, Minato was not able to find an adequate solution to the problem he had. Seeing that Minato was doing nothing, Fugaku was slowly losing patience since he hadn't come here just to stand around doing nothing. Tired of waiting for his opponent to do something, Fugaku decided that to spice things up, he only needed to turn up the heat, literally. "Since you're planning to do anything, let me do the first move." Before Minato's shocked gaze, he could see that Fugaku, by backing up a few meters using his newly acquired Manjikyu Sharingan, had thrown the Amaterasu directly at his family. He never expected that Fugaku would dare to do something as low as that, and what was worse, despite using the Hiraishin no Jutsu, would not be to arrive in time and prevent the attack from hitting his family. Minato was quite alarmed to see how the huge flame of black flames went straight towards his family. He knew that if he didn't do something about it, his family would die, and that was something he was going to allow. But to everyone's amazement, before the flames hit Kushina and Naruto, just out of nowhere, some kind of spectral hand appeared between the two girls, protecting them from the flames of the Amaterasu. None of those present understood what had happened. 1 second the flames seemed to hit Kushina and Naruto, and the next a spectral hand intervened. I see that you are nothing more than a simple rat that attacks treacherously, but what can I expect from someone who betrayed his village? When Minato and the others looked in the direction where that voice was coming from, they were surprised to see one of the best shinobi that have ever existed in the village, not to mention in the Uchiha clan. That Uchiha, in addition to having short and spiky black hair, wore a black turtleneck, very common among the members of his clan. He wore Konoha's front protector on a black ribbon tied on his forehead and wore a katana tied on his back. But the most striking thing was that his right eye remained closed while a slight trace of blood could be seen running through his eye. It was as if something or someone had caused him some kind of pretty severe injury. The truth is that no one expected that shinobi to appear at a time like this, especially Fugaku, since at first glance he seemed to be really upset with that boy's interruption. Shursui, what the hell are you doing here? You're supposed to be helping with the invasion instead of getting in the way. As annoying as Fugaku sounded, Shursui didn't seem to be intimidated in the least. The reason I'm here is because for no reason will I allow you to go on with this madness. You must have lost your mind if you think you only can stop me now that I'm closer to completing my invasions. You really think you'll be able to stop all the ninjas on your own? Who said I was alone in this? At those words, Fugaku's expression changed from one of mockery to one that showed some intrigue. Before I could say anything, several explosions were heard around, and then several of the invading ninjas were brutally incinerated with some black flames that were undoubtedly the product of the Amaterasu. Fugaku was both upset and bewildered by what was happening, since according to what he had planned, no ninja of the Uchiha clan should have betrayed him. Seeing his doubts, Shursui revealed something that Fugaku had not fully anticipated. You really believe that all the Uchihas were going to agree with your plan to invade the village? Fortunately, some members of the clan like me, Itachi, even Mikoto, in spite of everything, decided to put a stop to your plans before things got out of control. Quickly, Fugaku's expression to a look that reflected great anger and hatred at knowing that his family had betrayed him. And worst of all, without him realizing it, Itachi and Shursui were spies on behalf of Minato and Sarutobi, which is why they both knew the information regarding their plans. But after a few seconds, Fugaku started laughing like crazy, which caused everyone present to be a little puzzled, since it was very strange for Fugaku, although something deep down told them that something very bad was about to happen. Minato, what's so funny? Fugaku really believed that he wouldn't have a backup plan for this kind of situation. The truth is that I don't care if there are deserting Uchihas, since with some help very soon I will be able to obtain an unparalleled power that should have belonged to the Uchihas from the beginning. For a few moments no one seemed to understand exactly what Fugaku meant by obtaining unparalleled power, but upon hearing from Fugaku that he only needed the sealed soul of a certain demonic fox to complete his plans, only one thought flashed through Minato and Kushina's minds. Naruto. Quickly, Minato asked Shursui to go immediately to save Naruto, and that no matter what happened he should not allow anything bad to happen to him, even if it should put his life at risk. After receiving those orders, Shursui disappeared in a swirl of leaves, hoping to arrive in time. That Fugaku only smiled even more than necessary. I'm afraid that by the time Shursui arrives, that demon you call son will be in a better life. At what was said, Minato was so enraged that he decided that even though Fugaku was once his friend, or at least what was left of his friend, he would not forgive him for any reason if something bad happened to Naruto or his family. After leaving a clone to protect his family, Minato decided that he would end all this chaos. Even if for that he had to kill Fugaku, he would not hesitate to kill him. He would not hesitate in the least to finish him off. In another part of the village, it could be observed that some ninjas in particular were chasing two targets who had orders that no matter what happened they should capture them alive. That's how I like it. If they didn't try to escape, this would be really boring. It's better that you concentrate on the mission. Not for nothing does that guy want us to catch those kids. Despite all the destruction and countless deaths everywhere, Naruto and Karen did their best to save their lives, while trying to flee from the ninjas who were chasing them. But no matter how much they ran, the ninjas easily caught up with them. While Naruto was looking for a way to escape from those ninjas, while trying to save Karen away from Shursui, he did his best to locate them, but with so many battles around it was very difficult to find Naruto's trail. Going back to the fight between Minato and Fugaku, it was more than clear that it would not be easy to win, since as incredible as it seemed, both seemed to have almost the same strength. It is useless for you to continue trying to avoid the inevitable. At this rate, the Uchiha clan will prevail and will be able to rule, as it should have been since the foundation of the village. But how do you think the Uchiha clan will prevail? In case you haven't considered it, it's very possible that almost the entire clan will die in this fight without meaning. I know that very well. That's why I have a plan to ensure the supremacy of the clan. Seeing Fugaku's somewhat twisted expression regarding what he had planned, Minato had a very bad feeling. Hearing that Fugaku, after the invasion, planned to use the heiresses of the most important clans as incubators in order to strengthen the Sharingan of the clan, Uchiha had shocked Minato, especially when hearing that the first to suffer that fate would be Hinata and at the same time Naruto, since according to Fugaku, the Byakugan of the Hyuga and the power of Kurama that Naruto possesses sealed would greatly benefit the clan. Clearly, knowing what Fugaku had planned made Minato lose the last thing he had of patience. He may have been holding back before, but knowing what would happen made him quite angry. Seeing the expression of fury that Minato possessed at this moment made Fugaku quite happy, because if his plan succeeded, Minato would not be able to concentrate on the fight. You shouldn't worry about those girls since in a way I'm doing them a favor. Although thinking about it, I think that Kushina would be the right one for. Before Fugaku finished speaking, Minato, using one of his three-pointed kunais, along with his best jutsu, Minato managed to land a powerful punch on him that sent him flying into several trees. Once Minato arrived where Fugaku was, he could see that there was only one log, a clear sign that it could be replaced before hitting the trees. Using his skills and reflexes, Minato was barely able to elude some of Fugaku's Katon jutsus. Once Fugaku came out of the nearby trees, it could be seen that his cheek was red as well as a slight cut due to the blow received from Minato. I see that I touched a sensitive point, but don't worry, once all this is over and you are dead, I will make sure that I treat your once wife well. Those words only made Minato angrier and angrier. For no reason will I allow that to happen. If for all this to end I must kill you, I will not hesitate to do it. I'd like to see you try, but in case you forgot, I possess the power of the Manjikyu Sharingan, so I doubt you'll ever stand a chance against me. Believe me, you'll regret what you've done. Having a great conviction that he could protect his family, Minato released all the power he had, as he knew that facing the power of the Manjikyu Sharingan would not be easy at all. Meanwhile, near the Forest of Death, Shursui, with the help of some summoning wolves, was able to perceive a faint trace of Naruto's scent. Unfortunately, the wolves also perceived a faint smell of blood that was undoubtedly coming from some Naruto wound. Knowing that Naruto was in great danger, Shursui accelerated his pace more since for no reason would he allow Naruto to die, even if it meant that I had to die trying. I just hope I can get there on time, and it's not too late. On the other hand, things for Naruto and Karen were not going very well since they had both been cornered, and the worst thing was that Naruto had a slight wound on his head, which was bleeding at the moment. Once we take care of you, we will receive a great reward. All he did was to make that ninja end by drawing his sword. And don't worry about your little friend, because when it's all over she'll have a great time. Seeing what the ninjas were about to do, Naruto did everything possible to attack and protect Karen, even if he had to give his life in the process. Unfortunately, in his current state, he was no match for those renegade shinobi. Just as Naruto was about to throw a punch with the strength he had left, one of the subjects was able to hold his arm without any problem. You don't get dwarfed. Without Naruto being able to defend himself, that ninja kicked him hard in the stomach that sent him flying towards a tree, causing at the same time the tree, or at least part of the tree, to break due to the impact. Before Naruto lost consciousness, He could see how those ninjas were about to overdo Karen. So he tried to get up, but despite everything, his body was not able to react. Naruto was too weak to do anything. Despite his efforts, he was unable to protect Karen, and now he could only feel his strength disappear because of the pain. Because of the immense pain, Naruto slowly became unconscious. Everything seemed to be lost until... You're going to let it all in like this. When Naruto opened his eyes, he could see what was inside what seemed to be a cave, but what caught his attention was that in front of him, right at the bottom of the cave, there was a kind of silhouette. Do you want power, boy? For some reason, it could be that that voice commanded respect, but at the same time, it was somewhat warm. Who is it? Strange as it seemed, Naruto felt that voice was quite familiar to him. Do you want to protect your loved ones? Naruto didn't know why, but he felt that he could trust that voice. Yes. Whatever happens, I want to protect them. It was at that moment that Naruto was mowed down by a kind of crimson light that seemed to have covered the entire cave. When Naruto opened his eyes again, he could see that he was in the same place where that seal was protecting that creature. I see you finally arrived. When Naruto turned around, that Kurama was next to him, but the strangest thing of all was that this time Kurama was the size of an adult wolf. Kurama, who happened to you? Why are we back on this site? Naruto is not the time to give explanations. The time has come when you must release part of the seal that keeps the Jigaku Guardian restricted. Naruto was confused by Kurama's attitude, as he didn't understand what Kurama meant regarding the Guardian's matter. But it was at that precise moment that Naruto felt a power to leave that door. When Naruto went to the place where the seal was, he could see that between the signs/kanji of the seal that kept the door closed, some steam slowly began to emerge until the point where all the steam took the shape of a large dog. Who are you? I am known by many ways, but you can tell me Cerberus, the great guardian of the underworld. Hearing that, Naruto was quite surprised to learn that this giant dog was the guardian of the underworld himself, since with what Kurama has told him, he knew that it was a great creature of great power. But after remembering Karen, he left the surprises for later. Now what mattered was to save her, but before he could advance, Cerberus blocked his way. Step aside. I don't have time to be here. No matter what, I must go save Karen-chan from those damn ones. That's why I've brought you to this place. With the level you have, you don't have a chance. At Cerberus' words, Naruto was quite annoyed. Just as he was about to attack, Cerberus told Naruto that in order to defeat those ninjas, it was necessary to unite their powers and be one. But for that, he ran a great risk. Do you plan for it to end now? Won't you do anything to stop those ninjas from hurting your girlfriend? Have you forgotten everything you have lived and experienced together? I. At first, Naruto was able to remember that when he was somewhat alone in the orphanage, he had no one, but sometime later, when he was about 7 years old, he was able to meet Karen. Both of them, having no one, ended up being great friends, and so both began to form a bond that would last forever. Knowing that due to her weakness Karen was about to suffer made Naruto quite sad. Unfortunately, I can't do more. I've reached the limit. I failed Karen-chan. You can't give up so easily. There's still a solution to it, something only you can do. And what am I supposed to do? Despite what I do, I'm no match for those ninjas. You must know that you possess a power like no other, or perhaps you have already forgotten all that you have had to go through until now. Naruto was able to remember everything he had to endure in the past. Despite all the pain and suffering, he was able to move on. It was then that a quick memory of how he met Karen that day arrived. Being able to remember the strong bond he has with Karen, he slowly felt a power emerge from the depths of his being. I'll protect her. Hearing those words made Cerberus feel good. Now that Naruto was more than determined to protect Karen, he knew that the time had come to join forces. Although the truth is that that would be the difficult thing. So once he told Naruto what he should do to join forces, Naruto began to think about what Cerberus had said. For a few short moments, Naruto was thinking about what he should do. If he agreed to join forces with that creature, it was possible that he might not be the same again, but it was a risk he was going to take. For no reason would he allow those ninjas to hurt Karen. Being able to remember the good times he spent with Karen and the few loved ones he had, Naruto was more than willing to do anything to protect his loved ones. You've already decided what you're going to do about it. No matter what I get, As long as I can protect Karen and my loved ones, I will do what I can. Are you sure? Once you accept the deal, there will be no going back. If you're going to make me powerful, I'm capable of anything. I'll accept any condition, that's for sure. Without further ado, Naruto accepted the contract established by Cerberus, removing part of the seal from that door, thus releasing the great power that he kept sealed. Moments after accepting the contract, a hole opened up under Naruto, causing him to fall into what appeared to be a lava pit as Naruto felt his power increase. If you looked very carefully, you would swear that a wolf's silhouette appeared right in the pit. Before Naruto returned and could prevent something bad from happening, he could hear that voice again that seemed to give him one last piece of advice on what to do. If you want to protect your loved ones, and at the same time take revenge on all those who made you suffer, you must take all that hatred and pain and be able to turn it into your own strength. When all seemed to be lost to Naruto, a dense layer of dark chakra began to cover him to the point where the chakra had formed a kind of energy dome. When the chakra dome disappeared, everyone was surprised to see the changes that Naruto had undergone. In addition to apparently having grown a little, note, by growing I mean that he is a little taller than before, and having a black lock that covered part of his forehead and at the same time a small part of his right eye. Besides the fact that Naruto's hair was now a little longer than before, even his hands now seemed to be equipped with the sharp claws of some kind of beast. But the most disturbing thing of all were those eyes that showed immense hatred accompanied by a strong thirst for blood. It was as if it was a beast ready to kill at any moment. When they saw the ninjas that were surrounding Naruto, they were quite alarmed, but when some ninjas were about to attack him, "Leave me alone." Without knowing what happened, Naruto had expelled a large amount of power, destroying almost the entire place, while the ninjas were trapped in that explosion of energy. In the distance, two people who were passing through the forest at high speed could suddenly feel the surge of power that emerged from Naruto. Is it what I think it is? Yes, it seems that the Guardian finally woke up from his long sleep. So both subjects went to the place where Naruto and Karen were, hoping to be able to arrive in time and prevent something bad from happening. Chapter 8: The Arrival of Two Protectors. In the Blade Village, all the battles that were still being fought were interrupted due to the immense power that was momentarily felt, as despite being far away, a strong thirst for blood could be felt. Something that couldn't even compare to what was felt in the fight against Kurama, and that was saying a lot. Feeling that that amount of power and negative desires came from the forest caused several people, especially Sarutobi and Shursui, to have a bad feeling. I hope I can get there on time. With nothing more to do, Shursui increased speed to be able to arrive on time. Returning to where our blonde ninja was, he could see the destruction caused by the release of energy. After recovering a little due to the energy wasting, Naruto could see how several of his attackers were unconscious or in his best case dead as he expected, but because of releasing that energy in a single blow, he had been quite tired but still had enough strength to continue fighting a little more. But surprisingly, despite the wounds and pain, it was only a matter of a few seconds for the few shinobi who were still alive to get up with clear intentions of continuing with what was ordered. Boy, I must say that it really hurt me. Now I understand why Danza-sama wants your power. But in spite of everything, I don't understand why you risk these extremes for this little girl. If you know what suits you, you'd better let go of Karen-chan. Otherwise, I'll be forced to finish you off. Hearing that threat from Naruto caused several of those who were still alive to start laughing since they did not believe that a simple child could kill them. Please stop saying such stupid things. Even though your power will increase, you're still not up to us. I'll just tell you one more time. Leave Karen and leave and never come back. Otherwise, I'll kill them. Seeing that Naruto was still clinging to the idea of protecting Karen, no matter what happened, he was already starting to irritate the shinobi a little. I see that this little girl is very important to you. I don't really know what their relationship is, but that doesn't matter because unfortunately you will die in this place. But you don't have to worry about this little girl. Maybe if you give up and stop resisting, we might let you have a little fun with this girl. Of course, after we get a part of the fun. For Naruto, it was more than clear what those subjects intended to do to Karen, and for no reason would he allow that to happen. Having the idea of protecting Karen, no matter what, made Naruto begin to release a small mantle of chakra that slowly covered him until it formed a chakra tail. Although unlike Kurama's classic reddish cloak, the chakra layer that covered Naruto was a kind of purple color. Before any of them could react in a matter of the blink of an eye, Naruto had appeared right behind the shinobi who had Karen in his arms, ready to finish him off. Before that subject reacted, Naruto, using a kind of claw made of dark energy, managed to give him a powerful claw charged with a rather dark energy right on the chest of that shinobi, without harming Karen in the process, which caused an almost fatal wound in which it only took a couple of seconds for the shinobi to die. Seeing how Naruto mercilessly attacked his companion and also killed him, made the other ninjas explode in anger. So without thinking about things, they attacked Naruto. But because of the wounds that were still present, they did not give much resistance. It only took a couple of minutes for Naruto to finish off all the ninjas. He would have finished them off faster, but because of the fatigue from using so much power, Naruto had to deal with the situation a bit. They were nothing more than rubbish. But before continuing, Naruto felt a little dizzy since apparently he used more energy than he thought. Damn, this is nothing. Despite the efforts that Naruto made, little by little he was returning to normality. After returning to normal, her appearance went to where she had left Karen. Fortunately, she was still alive, but she was too tired and somewhat injured to move. Once Naruto was close to Karen, he did his best to cure her and be able to take her to a safer place, because even though he had finished off those ninjas, he knew that it was possible that in a very short time more would arrive, and in the conditions he was in, he would not be able to do anything at all. Naruto-kun. With some effort, Karen was able to get up, and with the strength she had left to hug her beloved blonde. Don't worry, Karen-chan. Everything is fine. You don't have to worry anymore. With the little strength he had left, Naruto approached Karen so that he could later heal her using some of the power he had left. After a few seconds, Karen was a little better thanks to the healing powers that Naruto possessed, but she still had to rest a little, since she was not yet in a condition to continue exerting herself. It was at that moment that Naruto was able to feel the presence of 3 people approaching where he and Karen were, which gave him a bad feeling since in the condition he was in, he could no longer do anything about it. Meanwhile, right near where everything had happened, the 2 people who were in the forest were about to arrive as they feared that something really bad had happened since the amount of dark power that was momentarily unleashed gave them a very bad feeling. Hey, honest, what do you think happened for the Jigoku Guardian to release that amount of power? The truth is that I don't know. I just hope that when we get there it's not too late. What neither of the 2 knew was that once they arrived at the site, they would be in for a big surprise. In the meantime, during their confrontation, Minato had a very bad feeling about that instinct that he felt momentarily, since for some reason he could feel that that feeling of death and destruction came from Naruto, and that could only mean one thing. This is really bad. If my suspicions are correct regarding the Kyuubi's seal, I have no time to waste. As for Fugaku, he could only smile in an almost twisted way like Orochimaru, since apparently he had finally found a good specimen. Since with the power he felt, he knew that if he managed to control it completely, no one would dare to oppose or disobey him without suffering the consequences. Who would have thought? It seems that that boy was finally consumed by the spirit of that demon. Listen, I have no time to waste with you. Now the important thing is to stop the destruction of the village. Without wasting any time, Minato tried to use the Hiraishin no Jutsu, but before he could perform it, Fugaku stopped him by throwing a powerful fire jutsu. Don't you understand the delicacy of the situation? If this continues like this, the village will be devastated and several people will die in the process. The truth is that doesn't bother me. What's more, I think that little boy will do me a favor by putting an end to the garbage that lives in this pathetic village. Seeing Fugaku's attitude only made Minato quite annoyed, but he knew that he should not waste any more time. No matter how much he wanted to finish off Fugaku at this moment, he knew perfectly well that the main thing now was to prevent Naruto from destroying the village. But no matter how hard he tried, Fugaku continued to block Minato's path, since for no reason would he allow him to continue interfering with his plans when he was only close to completing his ambitions. Returning to the forest, both Honest and his companion were doing their best to get to the place where the Jigoku Guardian was in time. For no reason could they allow anything to happen to him, since he possessed a great power that could determine the balance of the existence of humanity as well as the rest of the existing lives. When they arrived, they could both notice all the destruction that had been unleashed in the place due to the release of power. They could even notice that there were several corpses around the destruction zone, which gave them a very bad feeling. After looking with their eyes, they could notice that despite the amount of death and destruction present, they noticed that there were two people who were still alive, but were very bad. As they got a little closer, they could see that it was a red-haired girl and a blonde boy that they soon recognized as the Jigaku's spiritual guardian. To tell the truth, they were surprised to see that the guardian was just a child, but seeing everything that had happened and seeing the condition that Naruto and Karen were in, they had a faint idea of what happened. As soon as they tried to get closer to where they were, Naruto instinctively tried to protect Karen without caring that in his own condition, he could do almost nothing. Stay away. Despite not having enough strength to continue standing, Naruto would not give up so easily. Even though I am weak, for no reason will I allow them to hurt Karen-chan. Don't worry, dwarf. If we wanted to hurt them, we would already be attacking them right now, so you don't have to worry. Yes, of course. That's what they say now, but surely they wait for me to let my guard down, and then they will attack me. Despite being on the verge of collapse due to fatigue, Naruto was still clinging to not giving up in the slightest. Don't worry, little one. We are not here to hurt you. Despite everything you suffered, rest assured that you can trust us. The next thing Naruto could see before fainting was two silhouettes approaching him. Despite being unknown beings for some reason, Naruto felt that he could trust those people. Far from there, or at least 1 kilometer away, Shui was about to reach the place where Naruto supposedly was. I didn't know why, but I had this strange feeling that something out of the ordinary was about to happen. Konoha. At this time, the situation regarding the battles seemed to be somewhat balanced on the Konoha side, since despite the number of renegade shinobi and traitorous Uchihas outnumbered them, the Konoha shinobi, with the backing of the few Uchihas who were still loyal, managed to decimate a large part of the enemy, but it would still take them a while to finish off the enemy. Meanwhile, in the forests near the Namikaze mansion, the damage caused by the fight between Minato and Fugaku could be observed, that despite being tired and injured, neither of them gave up their attacks in the slightest. Both Minato and Fugaku were really tired because of the fight. Both had used their best jutsus, so they were almost at the limit, but they would still give everything to win. Despite having the apparent advantage of Fugaku using the Manjikyu Sharingan and his great skill with the Sharingan, Minato did not give up in his movements for any reason, and the worst thing was that despite using the best techniques of the Sharingan, Minato was able to evade them almost completely. Why? Why do you insist so much on protecting worthless garbage? That you don't understand that the village would be better off if that garbage, and that only the elite are the ones who should govern. They may be worthless rubbish to you, but to me they are more than a village. They are my family that carries the will of fire, and if to protect them I must give my life, I will not hesitate in the least. Fugaku, fed up with Minato performing a quick sequence and then unleashing a powerful burst of fire that wiped out much of the trees in the forest. Although Minato was tired, he was able to prevent the jutsu from making contact with him, but in a surprise, Fugaku appeared behind him in a kind of black trail. When Minato rejoined, he was surprised that Fugaku used Hiraishin no Jutsu, even on a smaller scale, which was impossible, since he was the only one who could perform this technique. How did you manage to do that? Perhaps you have already forgotten that I have the Manjikyu Sharingan active. It was thanks to that I was able to copy your best technique. Luckily for you, I still don't adapt to using that technique, but once I master it, it will not be a problem. Minato was at a great disadvantage, seeing that his best technique would be used against him. If he did not defeat Fugaku here and now, it was very possible that in the future he would become a terrible threat. Before he could do anything about it, Fugaku appeared in front of him and in one movement applied a special seal that restricted almost all his movements. Not being able to move from where he was so easily, Minato was in a great predicament, because if he didn't do something, Fugaku would kill him and all his effort would be to stop him, useless. Just at that moment, Fugaku slowly approached the place where Minato was trapped and with a somewhat arrogant smile, was ready to finish off the one who was once his friend. Say goodbye. Without any concern, Fugaku began to concentrate more chakra in his Sharingan, not knowing that it would soon doom him. When trying to use the Manjikyu Sharingan again, something happened that Fugaku had been completely ignoring, and that unfortunately affected him severely. Despite possessing one of the highest levels of the Sharingan Fugaku, he forgot, or at least didn't know, that overuse of the Manjikyu slowly began to deteriorate his eyesight over time. Unfortunately, not having enough experience in using his new power, Fugaku put himself in a dangerous situation. Because of his carelessness, the damage has already begun to affect him. No matter what he did, it was too late to remedy it. Seeing the opportunity in front of him, Minato, making use of the strength he had left, managed to get up, and before Fugaku reacted, Minato, making use of his power, or at least what he had left, hit a powerful Rasengan right in Fugaku's stomach, which caused him to crash into the trees, leaving him very badly injured. Due to the damage and impact produced by the Fugaku technique, he ended up with heavy damage from which he would not be able to recover. Once Minato arrived at the place where his old friend was, he could only look at him with pity. What are you waiting for? Finish me off once and for all. As much as I want to finish you off here, and now you should know I won't, at least not now. If you're not going to finish me off, what do you plan to do about it? Don't you have the courage to kill me? Because of your attitude and your actions against the village, I would normally be forced to murder you here and now, but I have something better. Once this is over, you will be executed in front of everyone in the village, along with the traitors of your clan who participated in this attack. Of course, if there is anyone left after this. Not to mention that any achievements or prestige of the Uchiha clan that they once acquired over time will be erased from the village's historical records. It'll be like I've never done anything about it. Hearing that, Fugaku was really furious. For no reason would he allow Minato to destroy the prestige that proved that the Uchiha clan was the best of all. Before he could do anything about it with attacking Minato, some chakra chains caught him, blocking his every move. In the end, Kushina next to Naruto had appeared next to the clone that Minato had left for his protection, which made Minato happy since at least his family was fine. After leaving Fugaku bound and unconscious in a tree, Kushina informed Minato of what had happened in the village regarding the invaders while he was busy confronting Fugaku. Minato never really expected that almost the entire Uchiha clan would decide to attack the village in that way, but then Naruto remembered something that Minato and Kushina had completely forgotten. By the way, Okasan, where's Naruto? I don't know why, but I have a strange feeling that something bad could have happened to him. Remembering the feeling of death they felt moments ago, both Minato and Kushina knew that they had to do something about it. But before doing anything, Naruto stopped them as he had something important to ask them. At first, they both told her that whatever it was, she should wait. But to her surprise, Naruto wanted to know the reason why Naruto was so similar to her, not only in terms of appearance, but also why he was sealed to the spirit of that kitsune who almost destroyed the village almost 9 years ago. Hearing that Naruto wanted to know what kind of relationship she had with Naruto made them both have a very bad feeling about it, since it would honestly be difficult for them to explain to Naruto that Naruto was actually her brother, since they had no idea how their daughter would react to knowing the terrible truth of what happened years ago. Returning to the forest. At this time, Shursui was near the place where he could feel the source of evil energy released moments ago, so he had to increase his speed more if he wanted to arrive in time. Once he arrived, he was quite surprised to see that there were several corpses of the once Iwagakure shinobi, as well as some mercenaries that Shursui managed to recognize as they were A-rank criminals wanted for some time. After reviewing the fatal wounds of the subjects and searching the surroundings for the person responsible for what happened, Shursui could not find the slightest clue of what had happened in this regard. What the hell has happened here? Who would be able to do something like this? As much as Shursui thought he could not find any explanation for what had happened, it was then that he could catch the sound of something approaching him. Using his reflexes, he was able to evade the projectiles that were thrown at him, but when he noticed that they were bird feathers, he was quite surprised to see that despite being simple feathers, they were as sharp as a kunai. In front of Shursui was a blonde subject, and he certainly had a curious appearance since he seemed to have a kind of white toga, But the most outstanding thing was that, as strange as it seemed, he had wings, giving him almost the appearance of an angel. Who the hell are you, and what are you doing here? It's certainly impolite to ask someone their name without introducing themselves first, but I'll still tell you. My name is Honest, and the reason why I'm here is because I came to help two guys who were in dire need of my help. And I can tell which people you're referring to. I can't tell you much, but I will tell you that the people we helped were a blonde boy named Naruto and a red-haired girl named Karen. Hearing that this subject had been with Naruto, and Karen made Shursui alert, as it was possible that the subject in front of him was responsible for what happened to those ninjas. But before acting, a second voice was heard from the shadows. If it were you, and if you know how to value your life, I would think twice before attacking, since it may be the last thing you do. When he saw that subject, Shursui had a certain chill, since the subject in front of him, given his appearance, seemed to be a real demon out of hell itself. He had the appearance of a demon dressed as a rebellious biker, armed with two swords called eggplant, which are apparently his favorite weapons. But perhaps the most intimidating thing about that guy was his claws. When Shursui saw them, he had a bad feeling about it, since something inside him told him that those subjects were not normal at all, so he should take them at all costs to interrogate them, and thus know what happened to Naruto and Karen. Seeing that Shursui intended to attack both Honest and his partner's side, as the last thing they wanted was to kill someone innocent. Beelzebub, you don't need to do anything wrong. Remember that we should not draw so much attention for the moment, so I ask you not to kill him. Don't worry, I still have my code of honor, so I don't intend to kill him. Seeing that this biker-looking guy was going to attack, Shursui prepared to attack, but before Shursui could do anything about it, Beelzebub quickly jumped on him, and using one of his techniques left him quite injured but alive. Who are they? And what do they plan to do with those boys? We can't tell you much, but let's just say that we came to protect these two boys from the mistreatment they are subjected to in this village. If you want to know more, tell your village leader to come to this point. From among his clothes, he took out a kind of map that he gave to Shursui. There is a map that he will meet with our leader and explain everything that happens. Without further ado, both Honest and Beelzebub withdrew, leaving a half-wounded Shursui somewhat intrigued by what had happened. Chapter 8. Decisions. A couple of hours have passed since what happened in the village. Due to what happened because of the invasion, several deaths were inevitable, but thanks to the efforts of the Konoha shinobi, they were able to repel the enemies, but at a great price. Anyone would say that because the Uchiha clan's invasion plan failed, things in the village hidden among the leaves would be quiet. The truth was that the problems were just beginning. Konoha. At this time, the situation in the village was quite delicate, with what had happened recently with the invasion of the Uchiha clan had not only caused several casualties and damage in the village. Due to Fugaku's betrayal, a large part of the Uchiha clan had been extinguished during the clashes, and now the only Uchihas left alive, besides Fugaku, who was currently awaiting his sentence for traitor, were Mikoto, Itachi, Shursui, and Sasuke. So after Minato and Sarutobi, they decided to hold a last-minute meeting to solve the problem. Although the truth was that the almost main reason why Minato and Sarutobi had started a last-minute meeting was because besides the matter of the Uchiha clan's betrayal, they had other concerns. The reason was that they were both really worried about what Shursui informed them previously, and to tell the truth, they were both quite serious, since with the information they received from Shursui a couple of hours ago, they were quite worried. Flashback. After the invasion ended, a team of ambush led by Kakashi searched for any possible infiltrated ninja that still remained in the forest. After searching for a few minutes, some ambush had managed to find Shursui, but seeing that he was severely injured, they took him as quickly as possible to the hospital to try to save him. A couple of hours after hard work at the hospital, Shursui was out of danger, so the only thing he had to do was rest for at least a couple of days to recover. But despite the injuries, Shursui knew that he had to do something about it. So without anyone noticing, he was able to send a messenger bird to try to contact Sarutobi and Minato as quickly as possible and try to communicate to them what had happened. After a few minutes, Sarutobi and Minato had arrived as quickly as they could, since judging by Shursui's letter they knew that it was something serious. Once Minato placed special seals in the room so that no one else could hear what was happening and that there would be no spies around, Shursui began to relate what had happened in the forest when he had finally found at least some trace of Naruto and Karen, and certainly never expected to meet those two mysterious figures. At the end of the story, both Sarutobi and Minato were somewhat intrigued by what had happened. They may not have believed almost anything Shursui told, but judging by their injuries, and after having checked the part of the forest where they found Shursui, they had a feeling that something big was about to happen, and whatever they knew, they had to be prepared. Flashback end. Once Sarutobi and Minato left the hospital, their expressions showed that they were quite serious and at the same time worried, since they knew that despite everything, sooner or later the information they received from Shursui would somehow end up sneaking everywhere in the village. So it would be best to try to use the information to their advantage and be able to try to prevent things from going out of control. Council Chamber. The meeting had already begun, and the truth was that the atmosphere was a little tense since with the invasion and betrayal of the Uchiha clan, they had not only managed to acquire a little disturbing information about the plans that some of its members had carried out with the help of Fugaku. What worried many was that both Sarutobi and Minato had received somewhat disturbing information from Shursui about what had happened hours earlier in the forest. At first, many in the council refused to believe that anything like what Shursui had said was true, but seeing the evidence that there were several in the council, they feared the worst, and that was that somehow the Kyuubi would break free and attack them again. If so, they must have done something before that happened. For several minutes, the council was debating what should be done about the Naruto matter, or as most preferred to call him, Kyuubi boy, since they were not able to see beyond the hate. At first, several members of the civilian side, with the support of the few shinobi who still saw Naruto as the Kyuubi, proposed to send a special Anbu team to be able to track Naruto and thus be able to finish him off when they still had the opportunity. But with the situation they were currently in due to the attack, it was not a good idea to reduce the few defenses that the village still had to almost zero. Others suggested that the best thing would be to bring Naruto back to the village so that he could be executed as the demon that he is, and that the Yondaime can complete what he left pending years ago, but not before carefully extracting from Naruto the soul of the Kyuubi that is inside him, and thus be able to completely seal it in Naruto, since she demonstrated good control over Kurama's demonic chakra. As tempting as the ideas they proposed regarding Naruto's fate were, those on Minato's side were really annoyed by the attitude they showed, especially Minato, so by continuing to listen to that kind of suggestion, his tolerance limit had come to an end. Fed up with the stupidities said by the council regarding the fate that Naruto had to suffer for being a simple demon or aberration of nature, Minato let out much of his murderous instinct, terrifying the civilian side quite a bit, while Sarutobi did his best to calm him down. Once everything was a little calmer, several of the council kindly asked Minato to explain his behavior without knowing that they would be in for a big surprise. Elsewhere, far from the elemental nations, right in what appeared to be an ancient castle a couple of hours ago, Honest and Beelzebub had arrived, each carrying Naruto and Karen in their arms. Seeing the state that Naruto and Karen were in, both Honest and Beelzebub couldn't help but feel a little sorry for both of them, since it wasn't fair that two little ones had to suffer in that way. But no matter what happened, they would do everything possible for both of them to stop suffering like that. Right in one of the rooms in the castle, Naruto and Karen were fast asleep, since with everything they had been through recently, they needed a little rest. Inside his subconscious, Naruto was in his little mental landscape, meditating on what had recently occurred regarding the release of the Cerberus seal, as it was something he truly wanted to know. But no matter how hard she tried to think, she could not understand what had happened to her at that moment that let out all her instinct. Seeing how dismayed Kurama was, he did his best to make Naruto relax even a little, but when he got a little closer, Kurama could realize that Naruto, despite being in his subconscious, still retained some residual energy from the seal he used, which was somewhat dangerous if he could not get rid of the excess energy, since he did not know if there would be side effects. For the next few minutes, which seemed like hours, Naruto did his best to get rid of the excess energy, but it was certainly difficult to control the energy. Naruto, you should try to concentrate. In order to control the power, you must let it flow through you, as if it were an extension of your body. Easier said than done. As difficult as it might be to control the energy he possessed, Naruto was not the type of person who gave up so easily. No matter what happened, he would strive to be able to control his power. Just when Naruto tried to concentrate a little more on concentrating and using the energy he felt at that moment in the forest, he again had that vision of a three-headed wolf destroying everything he had had a long time ago. But unlike the previous times, there was only that large yellow fox destroying everything in its path. But the strangest thing was that for some reason Naruto was able to feel everything, as if it were real. After reacting, Naruto began to breathe a little heavily, as what he had just experienced had been completely different from what had been before, but for some reason, Naruto somehow seemed to have enjoyed the feeling of destruction. Seeing the reaction that Naruto had regarding releasing the energy residue made Kurama worry. It was just at that moment that they both felt someone powerful approaching, so it was better to be alert to anything. When Naruto woke up, he could see that he was in a kind of ancient room made of stone. After observing the place a little better, he noticed that he was in a really comfortable bed. But when he quickly remembered what happened previously, he got rid of those types of thoughts since he began to worry a lot since he did not know what had happened to Karen after she had been knocked unconscious. Fortunately, after looking to the left of the bed where she was, she could see with relief that Karen was safe and apparently she was fast asleep. But when she thought a little better, she had no idea what was the place where she was and how long they had been in a place like this, which was extremely strange. I see that you finally woke up. For a moment, I thought you would be unconscious for at least 2 more days due to excessive energy wasting. Hearing that voice, Naruto turned around and could see that right next to the door of the room was a guy with black hair and red eyes, who for some reason was watching him carefully, as if he were somehow analyzing him. Naruto didn't know why, but something in him told him that he should be careful with that subject since Naruto could feel a great hidden power in that subject. Despite being at a disadvantage, Naruto quickly placed himself on guard because if he had learned anything throughout his life, it is not to distrust his instincts. For a few minutes, neither of the two made any move as for some reason it seemed that they were analyzing each other's movements as if it were a fight. In the end, the black-haired guy, without saying a single word, simply sat down in the chair at the back, a little disconcerting Naruto. "Who are you? Where are we?" When I saw that guy didn't respond to Naruto, losing his patience. "Are you deaf? I asked you where we are." Seeing that the subject still didn't answer made Naruto have a strong desire to hit him. But before he even moved, Naruto could feel that the air in the place, more specifically right where he was standing, began to get a little heavy. When he looked up a little, Naruto could see that this guy was responsible for exerting that impressive energy pressure. "Calm down, sight. Even a little, I will gladly answer your questions." Seeing that Naruto had calmed down enough not to do something reckless, that guy began to speak. "With regard to where we are, it could be said that we are in a place a little far from the elemental nations. Regarding who I am, you can call me Zeref." Just at that moment, Karen slowly began to wake up, and as soon as she saw that Naruto was by her side safe and sound, she couldn't stand the need to hug him tightly and then shed a few tears of happiness, as she was happy that despite everything that had happened, Naruto was fine. But as soon as Karen saw Zeref, she felt a little scared, but Naruto told her that she could trust in it. After Karen felt a little better, Naruto decided that it was time to know the reason why he and Karen were in some sort of ancient castle. Hearing that question, Zeref was a little uncomfortable because he knew that it would not be easy to explain the situation to them, but sooner or later he had to tell them. "The reason why you and your friend are here is because I have seen everything you have suffered in your village. And to be honest, I consider that those people are nothing more than simple blind people who cannot see beyond the hatred that is in their hearts." Just remembering Konoha made Naruto clench his fists with some force since for no reason would he forget the suffering that he and Karen had to endure most of their lives. This reaction did not go unnoticed by Zeref since he knew well the anger that was inside Naruto. During the next few minutes, Zeref told Naruto and Karen how it was that when he saw that they were both in danger, he himself had sent Beelzebub and Honest to help them, which surprised Naruto quite a lot since he never imagined that those subjects. But when Zeref mentioned something about the use of that dark power that he felt, and that it was not precisely the power he possessed, because he was Jinchuriki of Kurama, made Naruto a little nervous as he didn't know what kind of reaction Zeref would take when he knew what had happened. To his surprise, Zeref mentioned to Naruto that he should not worry since from the beginning he knew that in addition to having a bond with Kurama, he also had a link with Cerberus. After all, he is the one chosen to guide and protect the earthly guardian of the underworld. Naruto, hearing that Zeref knew something about the strange bond he possessed with Cerberus, made Naruto a little happy because perhaps he could finally know what he should do about his situation. But before he could ask Zeref about his situation, he told him that he should be away a little since he had to meet with someone at a certain point. Before leaving, Zeref mentioned to Naruto that when he returned, he would tell him everything about his relationship with Cerberus, but once he knew the truth, it was only up to him to decide what he should do about it. Without further ado, Zeref disappeared in a vortex of shadows. Despite what Zeref told him about having to make a decision about it, Naruto still did not forget those words that Cerberus had said to him earlier. If you want to protect your loved ones, and at the same time take revenge on all those who made you suffer, you must take all that hatred and pain and be able to turn it into your own strength. Returning to the village, most of the council was shocked to learn that Naruto, the boy they always humiliated, mistreated, and also considered a demon, or even treated as if he were the reincarnation of the Kyuubi, turned out to be Minato's son. Knowing that during all this time they were mistreating the son of their greatest hero in the worst way until now was something that made many feel in a terrible way. No matter what they did, the civilians or ninjas on the council who had treated Naruto badly in the past knew that it would be impossible to apologize to Naruto for all the wrong they have done to him. Seeing the expressions of regret and guilt from the majority was little for Minato. He and his wife would make sure that everyone learned the lesson of their mistakes. I hope that with this they learn a lesson from the mistakes they made since because of their fault and hatred that blinded them. Naruto's life was always a real hell that no one deserves to suffer. No matter how harsh or cruel Minato's words were regarding the situation, everyone knew that he was right. In spite of everything, no one deserved to suffer such suffering, and now it was too late to remedy it. Before anyone could say or do anything about it, a certain trio of elders belonging to the council, especially Danzo, tried to take advantage of this situation to their advantage. As the way things were going, it was only a matter of time before the pressure made Minato make a wrong decision, and if so, they would be able to. Unfortunately, despite his efforts to convince Minato that it would be best to negotiate with those who have Naruto, since it was certain that his powers would greatly benefit the village, but what really surprised everyone, besides Minato rejecting the proposal, was to hear Minato say that it would be best for the three of them to leave once and for all, since the only thing they were doing was to corrupt the village. Hearing that Minato wished for Koharu, Hamura, and Danzo to leave their position as advisors was something that surprised everyone, especially the three of them, since something like this was not supposed to happen. How did you get to do something like that? Do you know what you're doing about it? Of course I do know what I do. I am doing what I should have done a few years ago, and that is to remove them from their positions as directors. After all, you just seek power without caring about anything at all in order to get it, even if it means sacrificing innocent people in the process. Before any of the three could protest about it, all of the leaders of the major clans, along with some civilians who agreed with Minato, voted to remove Danzo and the others, as what Minato had said was true. Once the council meeting was over and some Ambus and Shinobi, at Sarutobi's request, had watched over Danzo and the others in case they did anything to get revenge, Minato retired to his home to prepare everything needed to meet Zeref at the place he had agreed upon. When he got home, Minato could notice that Naruto was still quite sad in his room, although he couldn't blame her since deep down he knew that he was to blame for everything that happened. Before he could say anything to try to get him to get even a little better, Kushina had arrived, and he could see that Minato had a rather serious expression, even for him. Minato, you shouldn't blame yourself for what's happening. And what am I supposed to do about it? If only it had been stronger, none of this would have happened, and our children might have had a normal life. As much as she wanted to comfort him, Kushina didn't know what she should do at such a difficult time like this. But before she could do anything, Minato spoke again. Kushina, do you think Naruto will be okay? After all, now that she knows the kind of bond she has with Naruto, it must be difficult for her to accept reality. At this time, Naruko was lying on her bed, and judging by her look, it was more than clear that she was somewhat sad since just a few hours ago, she had found out about the bond she had with Naruto. Naruto-kun, why did you have to suffer so much? Flashback. After Minato, with the help of some ambus, put Fugaku in a special cell where he could not cause a problem, he decided that it was time to tell Naruko all the hidden truth about his relationship with Naruto. Once Naruko and her parents were gathered in the main room of the Namikaze mansion, both Kushina and Minato had somewhat serious expressions, as they knew that it would not be easy to explain to their daughter what had happened. Kushina, Naruko, are you sure you want to know the truth? Once the strains are there may be a way back. Naruko, I don't care. If knowing the truth would help me better understand Naruto's life, it's better to be told. After waiting a few seconds, Minato and Kushina told Naruko everything that had caused Naruto's fate to change drastically and also make his life difficult for anyone to bear. In the end, Naruko was shocked by what her parents had told her. Never in his life would he have imagined that Naruto, in addition to possessing the soul of that fox that almost destroyed the village almost 10 years ago, was actually his twin brother, and that worst of all, that his parents could not do something to prevent those damned council from trying to take advantage of the situation. Before Naruko went to her room to try to process all the information she had received, she said something to father that would make Minato change even a little. If only you had been stronger in your decisions on the board, perhaps none of this would have happened. Without anything else to say, Naruko went up to her room, sad enough not to leave for a long time, because although it didn't seem like it, she felt a strong pain in her heart, in sentimental terms, knowing that Naruto always had to go through hell in the village for a burden that he didn't want to have. Flashback Yendi. Chapter 9, A Difficult Decision. A New Destination. It has been about 2 days since the attempted betrayal of the Uchiha clan occurred, and things in the village were somewhat tense. During that time, Minato was traveling a long way, since the designated point on the map he had was a little far from the elemental nations, so he would be away from the village and his beloved family for a while. During his absence in the village, Sarutobi had to resume work as a Hokage, as he hoped that he would be able to coordinate the situation in the village while Minato was away. On the way to his imminent encounter with Zeref, Minato kept thinking about the last thing Naruko said before leaving the village. As much as it pained him to admit it, in his heart of hearts Minato knew that his daughter was absolutely right. Had he been stronger in his decisions in the village as a Hokage, perhaps none of this would have happened. Unfortunately, he was now paying the consequences of his carelessness. Naruto. I hope you can forgive me. Returning to the village due to what happened recently with Naruto's disappearance. Things in the Namikaze mansion were tense since that night. Naruko has been very sad about the loss of her beloved brother. Just now Kushina was comforting little Naruko as best she could. Despite not having lived with Naruto so much, it was more than obvious that his disappearance affected Naruko a lot. After Naruko fell into a deep sleep, Kushina left her room to let her rest. Although deep down, she was really sad about what had happened, and the truth was that she did not like in the least that her family, especially Naruto, suffered in that way. After all, with everything that has happened, Naruto did not deserve to suffer in that way. Once he arrived at the courtyard of the mansion to try to relax, even if it was a little, he could feel the presence of someone familiar. Although honestly not at this time, he did not want to talk to anyone. Get out once, and for all. Jiraiya, I'm not in the mood. Right from among the bushes that were in the garden Jiraiya appeared, and it was more than clear that he was worried about what had happened. I'm sorry if I came at a bad time, Kushina, but I wanted to make sure that you and Naruko were okay. As with everything that happened with most of the Uchihas, and with the dismissal of the council members, and the fact that Minato is not here, it was possible that they were trying to hurt you and Naruko. At the moment we are fine, Jiraiya, but I would be lying if I did not digest that I am worried. With what has happened, I fear that something bad could happen to us. What they both did not know for the moment was that deep within the underground bases of Root Danzo, as well as the advisors, were already planning how to get revenge on Minato. Far from the elemental nations, Minato could be seen walking through a kind of wasteland that seemed to be somewhat desolate, as if no one or nothing had been there for years. After traveling a long way, Minato had finally reached the meeting place indicated by the map that was given to Shursui, and when he saw it, he could see that it was a kind of ancient and abandoned forest. At first glance, it seemed to be an almost desolate place with few signs of life, but soon Minato was able to perceive the presence of someone. "Get out of wherever you are and show yourself." Right in front of Minato, Zeref appeared, and you could tell from his expression that he was quite serious. Judging by his appearance, Minato realized that Zeref was a subject of care. "So you're Naruto's father." Seeing that Minato nodded, Zeref continued. "Honestly, you disappoint me quite a bit since I expected someone like you to be a good leader, but more than anything a good father. But as you have shown so far, you don't deserve any of that." Minato didn't fully understand what Zeref meant, but from the way he spoke it was more than clear that he didn't like it at all. "What do you mean by that?" "In case you don't know, I've done my best to help my family and everyone who lives in the village." Despite his arguments, Zeref could only feel some pity. "Do you really think so? If you had been a good leader and above all a good father, you hadn't allowed Naruto to have suffered a real hell within the village. But what can you expect from someone who condemned Naruto, his own son, to a life of suffering by giving him a burden that he did not wish to have?" Fed up with what Zeref said, Minato tried to attack him, but before he could move, he could feel how the pressure of the place increased considerably to the point where he was barely able to stand. No matter how hard he tried, Minato was not able to free himself from that pressure. "Otherwise, you will see me forced to finish you off." Seeing that there was no other option, Minato calmed down as much as he could, since fighting would be useless. Meanwhile, at the castle where Naruto and Karen were, having nothing to do until Zeref returned, they both decided to tour the place to get to know him better. While they toured the site, Karen was somewhat nervous since for her the castle they were in was something terrifying, so she decided to go hugging her beloved blonde. Seeing how nervous Karen was due to the atmosphere of the castle, Naruto only returned the hug to make her feel better. After touring a large part of the castle, both Naruto and Karen were already somewhat tired, so they decided to return to the room where they woke up. Just as they were about to return, just halfway there, they had come to what appeared to be the entrance to an old room. At first, they didn't pay attention to it, but when they were about to leave, Karen could notice that Naruto was still looking carefully at that strange door. "Naruto, are you okay? Say something." No matter how much I tried to get Naruto to react, he didn't seem to want to react, which clearly worried Karen a lot. Before Karen could do anything about it, Naruto, who seemed to be in some kind of trance, opened the door and entered that room. Seeing that she had no other choice, Karen decided to follow Naruto. What neither of them imagined was what they would find once they thoroughly investigated that room. Returning to Minato and Zeref. After having discussed what happened regarding Naruto and the reason why Zeref decided to rescue him and Karen that night when they were in trouble, it had surprised Minato quite a bit. "I never really expected Naruto to have some kind of relationship with that creature." After recovering from that surprise, Minato's expression became somewhat serious, since according to what Zeref had to make a decision about what he should do about it. The truth is that Minato did not know what to do, since knowing the important role Naruto had with respect to that creature made him hesitate a lot. Zeref, seeing Minato's insecurity, could see that he had many doubts about what he should do, and the truth was that he could not blame him since the decision he had to make could affect the lives of many people. "I know this is very difficult for you, but you must understand that Naruto has a goal to fulfill, so it is necessary for him to properly train his skills as a guardian." "I know, but still." Even knowing what was at stake, Minato did not know what he should do about it. On the one hand, he could make Naruto return with him to the village and thus try to do his best to amend his mistakes. But deep down, Minato did not think it was a good idea. Although he tried to give Naruto a good life with his family, Minato painfully knew that no matter what his son went through, for no reason would he forget all the suffering he had to endure in the past due to his mistake as a father. After thinking about it carefully, Minato came to the conclusion that the best thing for Naruto would be to stay in the place where he was so that Zeref could train him. At least that way he would be in a better place, and if possible Naruto would spend as much time as possible by Karen's side, since it was obvious that he was happy to be with her. "Whatever happens, please take care of Naruto and try to make him and that girl happy, and if possible tell him that I am sorry for everything that happened to him. The truth is that I wouldn't like to see Naruto end up hating the village because of me. I will do my best to make it so." Regarding your decision to hate or not, unfortunately, I cannot promise anything, since whether or not you should hate your village is up to you. Thus, after promising to take care of and train Naruto and Karen as best as possible, and promising that they would both return to the village in a couple of years, moments before his academy generation graduated, Minato retired a little better, knowing that what he did might be the right thing to do. At least leaving Naruto in that place where he would not suffer because of his mistake was the best thing he could do. Returning to the castle at this moment, our blonde Jinchuriki, who seemed to be still in a kind of trance, continued to walk through that strange room without stopping. While Naruto toured that place, Karen did her best to get Naruto to come to, but nothing seemed to work. As they walked around the room, Karen could see that it was a seemingly abandoned site, since everywhere she turned there was only a lot of dust, and in some parts of the site there were cobwebs. But what was really strange was that in some parts of the room there seemed to be statues of a few people arranged in what seemed to be some kind of pattern, which according to Karen gave the site a scary environment. But as soon as Naruto arrived at what seemed to be some kind of ancient painting located near the end, or what seemed to be the center of the room, he stared at the painting to react moments later and thus be able to return to normal. Seeing that Naruto returned to normal, Karen quickly hugged him. "Naruto-kun, it's good that you came back to yourself." "What? What happened? Don't you remember?" "The last thing I can remember was that we were walking through the castle, and then as I passed through a door something inside me, as if it were an impulse or instinct guided me by impulse. Moments later, everything went blank." Seeing that Naruto didn't remember anything about what happened, he surprised Karen a little, although with everything that has happened, the truth considered, she was not surprised. Just as they were about to leave, Karen, out of curiosity, decided to look one last time at that painting that Naruto observed moments before, and as soon as he saw it, he was quite surprised to see the painting. The painting showed the image of an ancient warrior in armor accompanied by a large canine in the middle of the battlefield facing a large number of enemies. It was certainly a unique painting that made both, especially Naruto, quite surprised, since the canine they saw in the painting, in addition to being huge, had 3 heads. But what caught the attention of both was that that warrior had a great resemblance to Naruto. Seeing that that warrior was similar to Naruto surprised both of them, since neither of them expected to find such a photograph/painting. Soon their thoughts, when a couple of voices behind them caught their attention. "They don't think they should be somewhere else. In case you don't know, this is no place for children." As they turned, they could both see that Honest and Beelzebub were watching them. As soon as they noticed that they were both watching them, both Naruto and Karen quickly apologized, since their intention was not to enter that way, since curiosity had motivated them to enter. Fortunately, neither of them was upset, in addition to Honest telling them that there was no problem with both of them entering, since according to what Zeref told him moments before leaving, was that sooner or later Naruto must enter that room, since there he would reveal his relationship with Cerberus. Before he could ask Honest how long it would take for Zeref to return, Naruto again felt something strange happening, as he slowly felt that something inside him was trying to tell him something. The next thing Naruto felt was that the seal that held Kurama to him began to burn to the point where his seal began to glow with some intensity. Seeing what was happening to Naruto made Karen and the others worry a lot, so Honest, with the help of Beelzebub, tried to do everything possible so that the seal could be stabilized. But after checking Naruto's seal, Honest could realize that the essence of Cerberus was gradually mixing with the seal, but the next thing that happened inside the room surprised the 3 of them quite a bit. Soon the few statues that were in the place began to glow to the point where the light that emanated little by little joined the glow that gave off Naruto's seal, momentarily cutting Karen and Honest. As soon as the light disappeared, both Karen and the others could tell that they were in what seemed to be a desolate wasteland where life seemed to be almost non-existent, the same place where the Cerberus seal was located. To be honest, none of the 3 of them knew where they were until a voice somewhat familiar to Beelzebub and Honest was heard behind them. "In case you don't know, right now we are in the mental landscape of Naruto." As soon as Karen and the others turned around, they could see that Kurama was behind them with a serious expression. But before they could ask how it was possible for that to happen, a strong tremor on the ground alarmed them. "What happens, Honest?" The union between Naruto's seal and Cerbero's soul must already be beginning. And judging by the energy released, it must be very close to here. As soon as the tremor ended, Kurama and the others could see that right in the middle of what appeared to be a rock formation with 4 pillars, Naruto was in the lotus position, while a kind of energy of a purple hue surrounded him. As soon as Honest tried to take a closer look at what was happening, a kind of force field that seemed to be 2 meters in diameter covered the place where Naruto was. As soon as the barrier disappeared, Honest and the others could see how 4 spirits wearing a robe of a different shade, red, yellow, blue, and brown, appeared out of nowhere. Immediately, Honest recognized them as the previous guardians of Cerberus' soul, so he bowed as a sign of respect, which confused Karen a bit. After a brief explanation by Honest of who those spirits were and why they were present, at least as far as she knew, Karen did the same as Honest of kneeling as a sign of respect. After finishing the necessary explanations, the 4 spirits told them that the reason why they were present was because at this time Naruto was going through a special cycle of spiritual union in which the seal that has Kurama sealed in Naruto's body is undergoing somewhat drastic modifications that could be somewhat painful, and that it was possible that Naruto would not survive due to the stress exerted. Knowing that Naruto could die in the process alarmed Karen and the others quite a bit, since they never expected something like this to happen during the union cycle. Before they could do anything, the 4 spirits explained to them the reason why this happened to Naruto. The reason why this happened was because being a Jinchuriki, Naruto's body could only hold 2 souls, Naruto's and Kurama's. So the spiritual union cycle consisted of releasing Kurama's soul, along with a part of his total power outside of Naruto's body, where the power that remained inside him would allow him to survive. Once part of the residual energy of the union will allow Kurama to generate a body of his own in order to survive, while the soul of Cerberus would occupy the empty place within the seal where Kurama once was, which would make Naruto become the new Jinchuriki/guardian of Cerberus. Knowing that Naruto would become the new Jinchuriki/guardian of Cerberus, and that Kurama would also be free, and that he would also have his own body again, was something that surprised everyone since they never expected something like this to happen. After recovering from the surprise, Karen and the others, at the direction of the 4 spirits, decided to wait since according to them the union cycle could take some time. While they waited patiently, the 4 spirits mentioned to them that due to the union between Naruto and Cerberus, possibly in addition to Naruto's physical appearance, it was very possible that his way of being would change, even if it was a little. So after waiting about a few hours, the seal union cycle was finally over, and they could notice that Naruto at the time of getting up from that place still had the same appearance as before, being tall, having blonde hair with a black streak that covered one of his eyes. But what really changed, at least in terms of appearance, it was that the mustaches that Naruto had for being Kurama's Jinchuriki disappeared, while his eyes seemed to have changed color. Now instead of being blue, they were of a purple hue. Perhaps the change in color of their eyes was due to the union with Cerberus. At the same time, Naruto seemed to have a more mature and serious look for a child of his age. Seeing Naruto's change, everyone was surprised, but they soon noticed that Naruto, when taking a couple of steps, ended up falling on his left knee while breathing a little heavily. Seeing Naruto's condition, Karen was as quick as she could to help him stand up. "Naruto-kun, are you okay?" "Don't worry, Karen-chan. I'm fine. I'm just a little tired." After recovering a little, Naruto approached the 4 spirits to receive an explanation of why he had been chosen as the guardian of Cerberus, and also why being in that room, he acted so strangely. But the most important thing was because that image of that ancient warrior who seemed to be with Cerberus was identical to him. Seeing that there was no other option, the 4 spirits told Naruto at least part of why he had been chosen and why this warrior looked so much like him. It had all begun several centuries ago when the Earth was about to disappear, because in ancient times humanity was in constant struggles against a large number of hostile creatures from the underworld that were led by someone cruel and powerful. Life on Earth was about to disappear. It was at that time that a human decided to make a deal with Cerberus. In exchange for lending him his power to save humanity from that fate, he would offer himself to fulfill any condition. Seeing that this human would do anything to save his people, Cerberus agreed to help him in his fight. In exchange, the human would be known as the first guardian of Cerberus. Thus, after a great battle, the human was able to banish those demons to the depths of the underworld, thus saving humanity from destruction. Unfortunately, because of the wounds caused by the battle, the human did not have much time left to live. Using his last strength, he asked Cerberus that every time evil tried to destroy humanity, he would look for someone worthy of being his successor as guardian. After receiving the settlement of Cerberus, the human was able to die in peace knowing that someone else would be in charge of looking out for the good of others. After that day, and over the centuries, there were a few guardians who took charge of keeping the world safe. Thanks to their efforts, and over the years right in the castle, where they were before reaching where they were, statues have been created that represent every guardian that has existed in the world since then. At the end of the story, Naruto now understood better than before the reason why he had been chosen. Now that he knew his duty as a guardian, he had to fulfill his mission. Before they could continue talking about what he should do, time had ended, so Naruto and the others were returning to the castle. Before leaving, the four spirits told him that Zeref would be in charge of guiding him as much as he could so that in the future he would be ready to fight against the enemy that would soon awaken. At most, it was about 10 years before that happened. At that time, Naruto had to do his best to strengthen himself as best he could. After returning to reality, Naruto and the others could notice that they were back in the room they were in before, but when they looked carefully, they saw that the statues were clean compared to how they looked before. Even surprisingly, they also saw with amazement that Kurama was free, and as they were told, he had a body of his own. Only instead of being a gigantic fox with reddish fur with 9 tails, Kurama was the size of an adult fox, just like he only possessed 4 of his tails. The latter was because much of his power was still sealed in Naruto, so it would take a long time for Kurama to regain all his power to the fullest. Thus, after leaving that place and having learned what his destiny was, Naruto knew that now he had to do everything possible to train and become stronger if he wanted to face the enemy. Chapter 10: The Elapsed Time. About 7 years have passed since what happened in the village, and since then several things have happened. Since the attempted coup d'état by the Uchiha clan failed, much of the clan, at least those who participated on Fugaku's side, as well as their leader, were executed as traitors, but not before Fugaku looked one last time as Minato, as well as some of the council members, at least those who were loyal. Removed from the village records all data belonging to the Uchiha clan, which made him quite annoyed, but unfortunately, he couldn't do anything about it anymore. Or at least that's what everyone thought. Meanwhile, the few Uchihas who were still loyal to the village did their best to move forward. As with the mistakes made by Fugaku in the past, it would be difficult for them to get people to trust them again. But what shocked the village the most after what happened was the news that Naruto and Karen had disappeared from the village. At first, several people were happy that this happened since at least, according to his words, they would no longer have to bother with the demon boy. But soon their celebration and joy ended when they learned that Naruto was actually Minato's son, which surprised a lot and left everyone stunned, and their reactions were not long in coming. Upon learning about the truth of Naruto, many in the village tried to deny it, since if what they said was true, they had committed something terrible for years. But as much as they wanted to deny it, sadly it was the truth, and now with what had happened it was too late to regret it. Currently, things had improved in the village since despite the casualties that occurred that day, Konoha has managed to recover. Unfortunately, that event left several emotional wounds in some inhabitants that would be difficult to heal over time. Hokage Tower. Minato was now somewhat busy working on some of the affairs of the village. Anyone would say that despite what happened years ago, he has managed to do a good job. But the truth was that Minato has not forgotten that day, where because of his mistakes his son was forced to separate from his family, without being able to do anything, and what was worse was that despite everything, he could not prevent Naruto from disappearing. That day 7 years ago. Just remembering what happened that day made Minato feel bad because as a father he was not able to do anything to protect one of his sons. But despite the pain he felt deep down, he knew that one day his son would return to the village. After all, he still remembered that meeting with Zeref so long ago, in which he himself offered to take care of and train Naruto, so he could control his abilities. It was then that his thoughts were interrupted when there was a knock on the door. Once he gave permission to enter, he could see that it was his wife, and by her expression, he knew that something was happening. As soon as Kushina told Minato that since what happened that day, she felt that Naruko no longer seemed to be the same affectionate girl as before, and that somehow she seemed to be distancing herself little by little. Minato could not help but sigh, since deep down she knew that he was to blame. You know, Kushina, you may not like what I'm going to say, but I don't really blame Naruko for behaving that way. After all, after learning that Naruto is actually her brother, and that she also knew about all the damage she suffered in the past, Naruko felt great pain. The truth is that I fear that he will end up hating us for what happened. If so, I hope that Naruko can one day forgive us for what we did, since the truth is that he would not tolerate that he ends up distancing himself from us. Just thinking about the possibility of losing Naruko on their side was something neither of them wanted to even think about, since having lost a son, so to speak, the idea of losing their daughter in an almost similar way was something they could not even imagine, although the mere thought of that they could only remember their beloved son. Just remembering his son and what happened that day when those two mysterious subjects appeared made them both sad. But it was not all pain, since according to Zeref, Naruto would return before graduation from the academy, and for that it was not long. Knowing that maybe, just maybe, they would have a chance to apologize to their son was something that made them happy, but deep down they feared that it was too late, and that their son would never forgive them was something that really hurt them. Keeping that in mind, Minato couldn't help but feel even more guilty. I just hope you're okay, and if possible you can forgive me. Wherever you are, with nothing else to think about, Minato back to work. Ninja Academy. Given that the graduation exam was a couple of months away, the students' abilities were being evaluated on a smaller scale to see how much they have managed to improve and to see if at this point they deserve to be considered as shinobi. During the tests, most of the students showed that they had at least what was necessary in skill to be able to pass. But those who have really stood out for the moment have been the children of some of the leaders of the main clans, since thanks to the training they received, their skills have managed to improve a lot. But even among the children of the leaders, the ones who showed the greatest control of their ability as shinobi were Sasuke, Naruto, and Reik, since during the last 7 years spent in the village, the three, for somewhat personal reasons, which I will not reveal for the moment, decided that whatever happened they would strengthen themselves as best as possible. During the practice of taijutsu, the students were divided into groups, a group of boys and a group of girls, where each one would demonstrate their physical performance. The first group to pass was the group of girls, but unfortunately a large part of the girls did not seem to take much importance to the matter of training and development as kunoichis, since despite all the time spent in the academy, many seemed to continue to be the same fangirls obsessed with Sasuke, looking at their skills. At the end of the taijutsu practice by the girls, the three who turned out to be the best among the girls in their group were Naruto, Ino, and Hinata, since unlike most of the girls, they did take the matter of being kunoichi seriously. Anyone would say that time treated the three of them well, since each one had a body that girls of their age would envy, and any boy would be somewhat enthralled. In the last 7 years, both Ino and Naruto, in addition to having long hair tied up, in the case of Ino with a ponytail and Naruto with 2 pigtails on the sides, and having good physical condition, both had beautiful legs as well as C-cup breasts that were the envy of many girls. In Hinata's case, it was not so different. Like her friends, she had long hair, but unlike them, Hinata had her hair down. Even at the age of 7, in addition to having grown in terms of height, her body had developed to the point of having breasts a little larger than her friends. Once the girls' group finished, the boys' group matches began, and this time the matches proved to be somewhat promising, as several of the boys showed great skill when it came to facing each other in a match. In the end, the last to stand were Sasuke and Reik, who, when they saw each other face to face, placed themselves in a fighting position waiting for their opponent to do something. About 3 minutes neither of them made the slightest movement. In the end, tired of waiting, Sasuke decided to take the first step, thus starting a strong confrontation in taijutsu. For a few minutes both Reik and Sasuke showed great skill when facing each other, since no matter how hard they tried, neither seemed to be able to give a single blow to their opponent. At that moment Reik with some grace dodged a kick from Sasuke. I see that you have improved a lot without wasting time, and taking advantage of the distance rake, tried to punch Sasuke, who barely dodged. The same could be said about you, but dodging my attacks will not help you at all. So, both continued to show the reason why they were the best in their group. In the end, after seeing the combat skills of both and seeing that they were already at their limit, Irika ended the taijutsu practice session of the day. Once classes were over and she had nothing else to do, Naruto was getting ready to return home when three of her classmates, the same ones who tried to overdo it with Hinata and Karen, who were interested in her, tried to ask her out, although of course, as expected, the three of them began to behave like a trio of perverts, insinuating several things that really irritated Naruto. So she was fed up with what they said. Naruto rejected, saying that he wanted to waste time with a trio of useless people who have nothing better to do than be complete annoyances. Obviously, the three of them didn't take it well, so they didn't care about anything and tried to take advantage of Naruto. But before anyone could do anything quickly, they were stopped by a couple of chakra chains, courtesy of Naruto. Once they were immobilized, Naruto gave them a somewhat cold look. Listen to me well, because I will only say it once. I am not interested in wasting my time with trash like you, so if you know what is good, you better stop bothering around. Otherwise, they will know what it is to suffer. So after calming down a little, Naruto gradually disappeared the chakra chains, but not before sending the three idiots against a wall as a last warning. Nearby, both Kakashi and Irika had seen what had happened, and they were certainly both somewhat happy that Naruto put those boys in their place. Although the truth is that neither expected Naruto to show that kind of hostility towards someone. What no one had noticed was that near where Naruto was, a mysterious hooded figure that was only visible was a strand of dark hair, was watching her. Asterisk, I see that you have grown up well and have managed to improve your skills. I just hope you're worth it for a good matchup. For when we meet again, we shall see which of them is the strongest. Asterisk, as if it were a ghost, that figure disappeared as if it had never been present. Unknown place. In a dark place that seemed to be abandoned, you could see how three people were gathered in what seemed to be a kind of office where just the flame of a candle illuminated the place enough. Thanks to the little light that there was, it could be seen that the three people were actually Danzo next to the former counselors, and as expected, they were planning to do their own thing. Well, Danzo, I hope you have something planned that is worthwhile. Since we stopped being advisors because of Minato, we have not been able to advance in our conquest plans. Hamura is right. Since we lost our council seats 7 years ago, we have struggled to move forward with our plans to make the village our own. I know you are upset about what happened, but I assure you that what I have planned will be worthwhile, and by the time that happens, this village will have a new regime. To tell the truth, neither Hamura nor Koharu were entirely sure that Danzo's plan would work, but given the circumstances they were in, unfortunately, they were not in a position to choose, so it will not be better for them to trust Danzo. Returning to the village. In the Leaf Village, it has been a couple of hours since Naruto left the academy, and due to what happened in the academy, she decided to take a walk in order to clear her mind a little. So after being able to clear her mind enough in one of her favorite places, but despite everything she was still upset, so she decided to return home. On the way home, Naruto was still somewhat upset about what had happened previously. It was then that Hinata and Ino caught up with her, and seeing that Naruto was somewhat irritated, so they did not need to be fortune tellers to at least get an idea of what happened. As they advanced through the village, everything was going well, until when they passed by the training ground, the three of them heard something that caught their attention, so with some curiosity, they went to investigate. As they advanced, they could see that near the training ground there were a few trees destroyed by a few cuts, while they perceived a faint smell of burning. Once they arrived at the place where the smell came from, they could see that in field number 13, right in the middle of the field, Rake was training, and from what they could see, much of the land near him was burned, as well as a few things in the place were completely destroyed, either by burns or sword cuts. Before any of them could even get close enough, a slight discharge from a lightning bolt passed by them, destroying a tree that was behind them, which alarmed them a little. As soon as they looked in the direction coming from the lightning, they could notice that Rake, despite not being looking at them, had his left arm along with his sword that showed he had a few electric sparks, was pointing right at the tree, which was previously destroyed. Seeing that Rake was responsible for sending that lightning bolt that almost hurt them badly, the girls were a little upset, But before they could say anything about it, Rake, even if looking at them, decided to respond. I thought I had been very clear earlier when I said that for no reason interrupt me while I am training now. If you know what is good for you, you better get out of here. Hearing that, Naruto couldn't take it anymore and went straight to Rake so he could talk. What's your problem? You know that you almost hurt us seriously with that electric shock. It was more than clear that Naruto was upset by what had happened. But before she could continue talking, Rake decided to speak again. My problem is that I ween that people know what they shouldn't now. If you know what's good, you'd better stop bothering, seeing that the situation could get quite complicated. Hinata and Ino did their best to prevent the situation from getting out of control, but before they could do anything, they saw that Rake began to leave. Before Naruto could tell her anything about it, Rake said something that silenced Naruto and at the same time somewhat annoyed and sad. If Naruto were here, I wonder what he would think if he saw you behaving that way, since I'm sure he wouldn't like to see you behave that way. Without further ado, Rake disappeared into the trees while Naruto could only look at the ground while a few tears escaped his eyes. As much as he hated to admit it, deep down he knew that Rake was right. If Naruto were to look at the way she behaved, he could only be disappointed, and that was something he would not like to see. Far from the Fire Nation, right in what seemed to be a kind of desert, what appeared to be two people were gathered, and from what could be seen, it seemed that they were waiting for someone. To tell the truth, you couldn't see who they were, since one of the people was hooded while the other had a mask that covered his entire face. After a few minutes, the person they were waiting for had arrived, and like his companions, it was impossible to see his true identity due to his clothing. You finally arrived. Do you have any idea how long we've been waiting for you? I am sorry for the delay, but the truth is that I went to attend to a pending matter. It better have been worth it to have made us wait so long. But at least I arrived, and that's what counts. Where is Akihiro now? It did not take long when the fourth member, which actually turned out to be an animal at least about a meter tall, appeared, and judging by its appearance, it could be seen that it possessed great power. When he saw him, the hooded man approached his companion. Dime Akihiro. You got what you needed at that moment. His animal companion, using his elongated tail, gave him a kind of parchment that next to it had a symbol similar to a musical note. As soon as I handed him the parchment, the animal's expression became somewhat serious. This parchment had better be worth it, since the truth is that it was not easy to get it. Don't worry, Akihiro. Rest assured that this scroll won't be of much use. It better be that way, because when it all starts, we will only have one chance. Once the masked subject put away the scroll, one of his companions approached, and despite having the mask on, it could be seen that he was somewhat serious. Since we have the parchment, it would be best to separate and return to our positions for the moment. Otherwise, they could begin to suspect us, and that would jeopardize our operation. They developed a plan of what they should do when the time came. Thus, after having everything planned, the four of them separated and went their separate ways, knowing that they would soon be reunited, and when that happens, they will have to use their forces.